the board meeting via Zoom. Please allow me to begin by reviewing our procedures for conducting our meetings, particularly with respect to public comment. We have a narrow agenda tonight, but members of the public who wish to address the board may indicate their desire to do so during the relevant portion of the meeting. Persons who wish, trying to figure out whose echo I'm hearing. Persons wishing to provide comment on an agendized item should raise their electronic hand in the Zoom platform to address the board when that item is under consideration. Persons wishing to address the board on matters that are not on the agenda should raise their electronic hand in the Zoom platform during the public comment portion of the agenda. And we ask members of the public to be advised that the board cannot respond to or deliberate with respect to comments raised regarding non-agendized items. With that, I'd like to go ahead and move to our agenda for this evening, or our open session agenda. I've just described the public protocol, and now perhaps Ms. Loay that we're all here. It would be great if we did the roll.
Student trustee Nori.
Here.
Trustee Dubois.
Here.
Trustee Jack.
Here.
Trustee Sarver.
Here.
Trustee Thompson.
Here.
President Weiner.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you, Ms. Loay. I would now ask board members if they had a chance to review the agenda, and if so, would invite a motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we've approved the agenda. That brings us to, do we have a report out of closed session on our agenda? There should be. I don't see that on our agenda, but I will go ahead and report that the board took no action during closed session, but also to indicate that the board will likely adjourn back to closed session to complete its consideration of item 2.4. All right, with that, that brings us to item 6, which is approval of the consent agenda. As board members know, action on the items on the consent agenda is taken simultaneously with one motion, which is not debatable and requires a unanimous roll call vote for passage. The action indicated on each item is deemed to have been considered in full and action taken as worded therein. If a member of this board, if the acting superintendent or a member of the public so requests, any item shall be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular order of business. Is there a request to remove anything from tonight's consent agenda? All right, seeing none at this point, then I would invite a motion to waive the reading of the consent agenda, to accept the reports, adopt the resolutions, and approve the other items.
I move.
So we'll go to Jack moved, and we'll treat Thompson as having seconded. And so then, Ms. Loay, I think it would be great if you led us through the roll.
Student trustee Nori.
Yes.
Trustee Dubois.
Yes.
Trustee Jack.
Yes.
Trustee Sarver.
Yes.
Trustee Thompson.
Yes.
President Weiner.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Excellent. Okay, this brings us now to item 7, which is public comment. As noted, this is a period of time for speakers who wish to address the board on matters that are not on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the board on public comments? I don't see any raised Zoom hands. I will note, since this is also a time when we do correspondence, I will note for my board colleagues that I received a letter from the San Mateo County Office of Education concerning our COVID-19 operations written report and adopted budget for FY 2021. Crystal, I'm sure you've seen a copy of this as well, but the San Mateo County Office of Education has gone over our COVID-19 operations written report and acknowledges that all requirements have been met, which includes the adoption by the local governing board in conjunction with the annual budget and posting of the report on the homepage of the LEA's website. So we have a clean bill of health from the county on that. Okay, that then brings us to item 8, which is a little unusual. Item 8 is ordinarily styled as superintendent's recognition, but we're going to mix it up a little bit tonight. This evening, it's a board recognition, and specifically, we would like to extend the board's recognition of Crystal Leach, whom the board has designated to serve as our acting interim superintendent following the departure of Superintendent Streschley. I can say that the board has great confidence in Ms. Leach and derives great comfort knowing that the leadership of the district is in her hands during this transitional period. Although Crystal's background is on the financial side of school administration, she defies conventional stereotypes of CBO types, and we know what we have in mind here. She is in fact very much a people person, someone who is warm and deeply empathetic. I'm not sure that will make this job easier, but it is a wonderful quality. She's also a pragmatic problem solver. If you give Crystal a task or a challenge, she's on it, she runs with it, and she gets it done. Crystal's also a strong oral and written communicator. We saw very clear evidence of this in the outstanding work that she did in developing a new approach to presenting the district's financial information. She and her team created a budget book that was simultaneously comprehensive, but that also highlighted key financial trends, and also made it easier for the board to see how board and district priorities were reflected in the budget. Now, despite Ms. Leach's impressive collection of talents and her leadership qualities, taking on the superintendency of a district as complex as Sequoia on an interim basis is, of course, a major challenge. And we accordingly are very fortunate that we have such an impressive collection of senior leaders in our district, both in the district office and at our sites. I'm looking at many of you on my Zoom screen right now. We are, to use a sports metaphor, down a player right now. And so I urge all of our leaders throughout the district to step up and to do their part to support Ms. Leach, which really is not about supporting Ms. Leach. If you think about it, it is ultimately about supporting our students and their families, right, during this trying transitional time. And knowing you as I do, and again, I'm looking at your little rectangular faces on my screen right now, knowing you as I do, I'm confident that the board can count on our staff to rise to the occasion. You know, this is unscripted. I don't know if Crystal, you know, if you have a right of reply or anything, otherwise we'll just move on with the agenda.
No, I'm just quickly, you know, want to again say how humbled I am to serve our families and all of our wonderful staff in this position. So thank you. And we're going to get this done.
Thanks. Yay. Okay. Great. So normally at this point around this point of the agenda, we would have presentations by our bargaining units, and we would have a formal report from our student trustee. But of course, tonight this is it's a study session-ish, and so we really have our main agenda item, which is to consider the school plans. And so we're not going to have a separate reporting section since this is a study session. But of course, we are eager to hear from representatives of our bargaining units, and we are eager to hear from you, Mr. Norrie, you know, during the course of the discussion. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to item 9, which is the presentation, item 9.1, which is the presentation and discussion of school plans. Also, I want to say a little something about how at least the president and the vice president and the acting superintendent thought it would make sense to present this matter. There are a lot of reports, you've seen them, and we were worried that if we had like a 10-minute presentation by each site followed by a 20-minute discussion of each presentation by the board, and we don't do so good at keeping it to 20 minutes, that would be 30 minutes per site, which would be like 4 hours. That didn't seem like the best way to do this work. So what we are proposing, well, how I would like to proceed is as follows. we'd like to go ahead and hear each of the sites present their report seriatim. And I'd like to really hold board discussion. Now, if board members have technical clarifying questions that they want to ask about a particular presentation, if they trying to understand something, of course, it would be appropriate to ask that after each presentation. But to the extent that we want to take on discussion, I think it would be productive for us, in fact, to have a discussion after we've heard all of the reports. It, I think, will help us to have our conversation at a more strategic level and maybe to engage in some interesting comparative consideration of the issues rather than having the same kind of series of comments or questions after each report. So that's how we have proposed to proceed with our study session this evening. And with that, I don't know if I'm handing this over to Ms. Leach or Ms. Hanson. Bonnie?
Thank you, President Weiner. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, it was last spring, and sites were dutifully preparing their site plan, school plans based on data and anecdotal evidence backed up by what they heard from their constituents and what we had listed in our LCAP and as governance goals. And then COVID-19 descended upon us. And I'll just say the Black Star landed, and then I will stop the Star Wars analogies. Although can the Death Star land? Maybe not. We shifted course, and instead of presenting you with the school plans on June 10th, as had been the pre-COVID plan, we instead updated you on how distance learning was going in our early hours of trying. And then you all approved the categorical budgets because that was what was recommended to us by the county so that people could spend the money after it had been approved, which is always an excellent idea. So now we have before you this evening altered school plans. They will still address the site goals that are still informed by the LCAP and the governance goals, and of course, the site data. But at your request, they'll also put it in the context of how this is going in the world of distance learning. So with no further ado, and in order by reverse order of how long it took them to do their back to school presentations, I give you our first principal.
Okay, good evening, trustees, cabinet.
And I just want to,
Oh.
I just want to say very quickly, this was a really gratifying old school feeling to get like this in the mail. It reminded me of my early days on the board when the whole board packet used to come to my house. So sorry for interrupting, Amika, please proceed.
That's okay. Just logistically, should I share my screen, Bonnie? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I have 7.5 minutes, so I'm gonna skedaddle us through the slides. Give me a moment. And thank you to my colleague who is also joining us this evening, Miss Joanna Ho, who is here to help us as well fill in any blanks of the school plan. So welcome to the East Palo Alto Academy School Plan presentation. I want to begin by reminding everyone that we at East Palo Alto Academy have the great pleasure of existing to serve the community of East Palo Alto, Eastern Menlo Park, otherwise known as Belhaven. We have two things that we stand by strongly, and probably since the mixed reviews of what happened last night at the presidential debates, more than ever, we are feeling a sense of urgency to diversify the culture of power. We believe firmly that our students' narratives and everything they bring to the world are the answer to world peace if they could sit at those boardrooms, operating rooms, classrooms, and courtrooms. So diversifying the culture of power is one thing that guides us, as does disrupting the cycle of poverty for all communities. That's why to graduate from EPAA, you must do 100 hours of service minimally. So with that, I welcome you to the EPAA plan. Now, the A through G completion rates are something that drives us because, as you know, we do have the majority of our students come from Ravenswood, and yet despite the fact that there are unfortunately some challenges with their academics when they come to EPAA, we still have them all on the A through G track. We can go into detail about how we make that happen. But needless to say, it's quite a lift. and I say this with a lot of love as a parent of Ravenswood. It is a lift nonetheless. So we do have them generally come to a 17% reading on grade level. 12 to 17%. That was true again this year. Within those 4 years, we were able to get them to 56.2% last year, graduating A through G eligible. And the EL population did go down quite a bit. We have quite a few newcomers and fifth year seniors that are still with us. That ties into this data. So I just want to flag that because I know at the end, there's always the question of what can the board do? Anything we can do to support our newcomers is welcome. And also this is a thing the state is struggling with. If I'm a student with an IEP, it is almost impossible for me to be redesignated as fluent English proficient, given the parameters that are there. So we're working really hard to make sense of that because that is just it's an Achilles heel for us. Special ed population, we sent some kids with IEPs to college who are having an awesome time. One of them has already been going to office hours with our foundation team. We're super proud of her. And then of course, the vast majority of our students qualify for free and reduced lunch. So that's why the number for A through G completion matches the general population so closely. I was going to stop to see if there are questions, but no questions allowed till the very, very end of all of my colleagues' presentations. So unless there's a misunderstanding, I will carry on. This CASB data is the same because we unfortunately did not take the CASB exam this year. I do want to flag that I would have loved for our 11th graders to take this test. So you would have seen that we are on an upward trajectory at East Palo Alto Academy, that this data was only going to get even better. But unfortunately, those good students are going to save their energies for other things, not for the SAT. Well, actually, some of them are insisting on taking the SAT because they feel this sense of, I want to show the world what I'm capable of. Now, our school plan is very much aligned, if not exactly aligned, to the WASC. First, data systems and analysis. I think the best example of this is the progress we have made with the MTSS work. So we are looking at data as it relates to attendance religiously. I think I showed you the Spark line and everything that we've done recently to track that. So thank you, Joanna, and your team for that. We also are using data to track the academic needs. So we are looking at credits, we're looking at GPAs, most recent reporting on that. So that in the MTSS meeting I just left 2 hours ago, we were looking at all of that data. We're using it to drive data for college and career readiness. We're using it also for school and mental health. We're doing a lot of universal screenings, both the panoramic one and the SDQ, so that we can use the data to drive the way we're going to give this support to students, even if it's through distance learning. And finally, so there's the 5 buckets for MTSS: academic, attendance, college and career readiness, and behavior, which, knock on wood, we're saving all the energy that we usually spend for behavior interventions on attendance interventions. And then of course, so attendance too. So the data systems and analysis is something we talked about in our WASC and again for our school plan, and we are chipping away at that in very concrete ways, even in the midst of a global pandemic. Goal 2 around quality student interactions is very tied to goal 3, which is project-based learning. It is looking at our instruction and looking at the quality of the students' abilities to both articulate in the field of, because language is so important for our students with so many second language learners. So I think we're at 78% this year. We really talk about the student-to-student interactions, which is PD we did district-wide, and also the ways in which we can reinforce that in the distance learning format. So just this morning during PD, we did, it was such a beautiful thing. I wish I could show you a snippet of it. We watched a student's presentation of her defense of learning. We watched that clip together as a team. We put it against our communications rubric, which is part of our graduate profile. And then in departments talked about how do you coach up a student who's so close to proficiency in a distance learning format? How do you keep rigor at the center of your conversations in this distance learning format in the middle of a global pandemic and still keep morale high? And it was something that was always so inspiring, that when teachers come together and collaborate like this, how they fuel each other. And that is good for morale, because we realize that we are still, despite all obstacles, centered on student learning. And so that is, those are just a few examples of how we're doing this work today. Beyond that, these are the ways that we're tying into both the LCAP and the school plan that ties to even at the district level. So again, strengthening the quality of instruction by improving engagement and rigor for all students. That ties into goals 2 and 3. Goal number 2, using an equity lens to bolster student outcomes by addressing institutional and instructional practices which perpetuate inequities in student outcomes. You have to be clear with the data. That's the only way to hold things equitable. Not the only way. It is a very important way. The quality student interactions and the project-based learning. Those are all things that we're looking at through an equity lens. It's very important that engaged instruction is one thing, but it's also very specifically geared towards being culturally relevant, responsive, and my new favorite thing to really plug is affirming. So when we talk about our curriculum, our students feel affirmed by the work that they've done. I have this beautiful slide that we can't see today that talks about the different projects we've been engaged in that does this exactly. Ensuring all students receive the appropriate academic, behavior, and social emotional supports. This is all that MTSS work I just told you about. Again, I have all kinds of tracking systems, but we're going to even go further with that when we get to look at some of the toys that Shayna and Jarrett are working on. And then goal number 4, supporting, promoting successful student outcomes in our small schools. I just want to thank the district for continuing to support the small schools and even extending our reach so that I have colleagues who understand the small school movement right here at Tide and Redwood and the adult school. So we continue to do that work together, which is really nice to be able to collaborate in that way. Finally, the board support, please continue to herald this work that we're doing to support systemic equity and anti-racist work. I know that there was some question during this transition of leadership that we not lose any of the momentum that we've built upon and continue to just really focus on, as I said, after last night's debate, the sense of urgency is no joke. And it is something that is at the heart of our work. And finally, continuing to listen and pivot to meet the unique needs of small schools. I think probably the most important thing at a small school is that we can really focus on one thing with such a laser intentionality that is very special. And anything that we can do to really get down and nitty gritty and really push ourselves because we can be so focused on details that are all about the individual students, the individual student needs is such an awesome thing that we get to do. I believe I'm at time. I do have little glimpses really quickly. This is the PBL before and after, how many more projects we're able to do. So before, we're looking at by grade level, now we're looking by department. This is the graduate profile at a glance. So just some examples of the work that we've done in the spirit of the SIPSA. So I don't know, Joanna, if you wanted to add anything. I know you said to just let me go and then add anything, or we're at time, I guess. Okay.
I think
well,
you did great.
Big thanks to Joanna who led this charge, and I really appreciate your work and being a colleague and my new work wife. I do love my new work wife.
Amika and Gianna, thank you very much. Are there specific questions, kind of technical or clarifying questions for Amika? And if you have, EPA or small school specific questions that or issues that you want to raise, jot them down, and then let's kind of take them up during the discussion. Because again, it may be that any question we ask now might be informed as well by other principals. So looking to see, I don't see any. I have the screen. I have to rely on blue hands because with the screen, I can't see anybody waving at me. I see Diane waving at me. So all right. So seeing none, let's roll on then. Bonnie, who's next?
Well, that would be Diane Burbank and Diane Mazzei.
That explains the waving. I thought they were just happy to see me.
I'm sure it's both.
I think both can be true. Good evening to board members and Interim Superintendent Leach, attendees, and our Woodside staff who's zooming in for the night. Diane Mazzei and AVPs Chuck Velskow and Wendy Porter, who all had hands into this report. And so a reminder of what our 4 goals are. And so for our WASC goals, they align with our school site plan goals now. The first one is on campus climate, focusing on getting the subgroup stats equal to or more than the whole school stats. Goal number 2 is achievement and rigor for all through 2 lenses, the UC A to G, of course, but then also the new state dashboard mandate of looking at CTE pathway completion. Number 3, we're focusing on English learner success rates. And number 4, we're focusing on students with disabilities success rates. In our WASC cycle, we're in year 2 of a 6-year accreditation, so these goals are fresh. The district prepared our teachers to tackle these goals, particularly goal number 2, achievement and rigor for all, with an intense professional development to start school and get everybody ready for distance learning. We have also spent a lot of time and effort and drive-throughs getting students ready for distance learning. So some of the toolkits we handed out included simple things like that they might not have at home, like a school bag, like a profile book, like headphones. For our Green Academy soil and seeds and pots, I'm sure growing on windowsills all over Redwood City, Portola Valley, and Woodside. For our art classes, erasers and pencils and things that I'm not sure exactly what they are. And then for chemistry, all things plastic like pipettes and beakers and baking soda and the thermometers. So kids have in their hands the same things that they would have in their hands in a brick and mortar classroom. So we're excited that kids are able to do that for first quarter. And now that we know that we'll be in distance learning through the semester, we will work to get new kits supplied and ready for drive-throughs for second semester. How do our school goals align with the governance goals? Our goal for A to G and CTE completion align with the governance goal for quality instruction. You take the governance goal to use an equity lens for student outcomes, and the 2 goals focusing on the success rates of our English learners and our students with disabilities align with that. And of course, our goal for increased campus climate issues aligns with your goal of our goal of social emotional supports. And so which data did we use? I mean, there's a ton of data. So in order to get it on just 2 slides, I really had to be selective with my team's help. What data has changed is the lens that we used for it. Our demographic data has ethnicity-wise has remained the same. But our subgroup enrollment data is down 8% from last year. That may tick up a bit again as students reapply and get approved for it, but that 8% was enough of a difference that we want to pay attention to that we don't lose track of the 1/3 of our students who qualify for free and reduced price lunch. Of course, technology has been a big data change with the number of hotspots, the number of Chromebooks, both for students and staff that we have checked out. And just the number of how the work has changed for our 2 tech assistants on campus. At least 1/3 of their day is taken up with get help tickets and phone calls on the hotline. So kids, if they're kicked off, if they can't find a Zoom link, are able to get walked through and get back into class as quickly as possible. So the tech, of course, has really changed. The surveys that we did last year, you know, we're a Qualia school. We do the My Voice survey every spring. We've got 9 years worth of longitudinal data for it. Although last spring, we only got about 1/3 of the student body to take it because it was all virtual and it wasn't mandatory. There weren't letter grades, there weren't synchronous bell schedules. It was a tough call to get kids to do that. But we're still using the data this year and calling it valid because when we look at our subgroups, it mirrors our school-wide demographics. So we feel solid about the work that we're, or the data that we're relying on with our surveys. As a result of that, 2 of our strategies include a continued partnership with Qualia and a new partnership with Circle Up Education for anti-racist education, diversity, equity, and inclusion. More data, 2 more data points used to inform our school plan and strategies. Our 2020 AP scores, it was a very weird year, but even with the weird year and the odd spring, scores increased. The number of students enrolled, and that was before COVID hit, increased. And the number of AP courses being taken per student increased. Our strategy is that with our work with campus climate and subgroups, we want to make sure that the ethnic enrollment in all of our AP courses mirrors our school-wide demographics. So we'll be paying attention to that subgroup data. And of course, our A to G completion is remaining steady. We are not pleased. We're happy that it's remaining steady, but there's still an achievement gap in terms of being college ready for our English learners and students redesignated fluent English proficient by our students with disabilities and by our Title I students who are economically disadvantaged. Through that, because we realized it was a goal, we got foundation funding from a new private donor to fund another full-time college specialist who is bilingual, who we took from the Boys and Girls Club. And so that position will help us achieve that goal. The most important goal that we wanted to, or data point that I wanted to talk about is the newest one on connectivity and how that is relating to kids on the ground. We have used 2 different data points, the ranking of engagement that teachers put in on Wednesdays and attendance to determine our top 100 kids that are not connected. We're prioritizing connectivity for our upcoming round when we get the go-ahead to focus on on-campus academic support during the school day for those 100 kids who have demonstrated need in lack of connectivity. So those are the students, and 75% of those 100 are English learners, are RFEP, or limited English proficient. So getting them to campus in the stable cohorts when we get the go-ahead will be our first effort. Efforts now include a lot of phone calls home by classroom aides, home visits by our campus supervisors, and a lot of outreach done by our attendance tech. So the documented connectivity in those top 100 kids will be our efforts over the next 2 weeks to see how many we can draw back in. In terms of board support, I think that the most important support that you have already given is courageous leadership. So thank you for that. Resources in a public school setting are always smaller than the need. So I'm identifying 3 funding streams for continued support because of the impact that will make. Because the state is now tracking our CTE capstone classes, and those are usually 3rd year classes, they tend to be smaller. They tend to need higher degree and more expensive materials and equipment. So support for our CTE capstone classes would be impactful. A long-term technology strategy to increase our classified site tech staffing and a budget for replacement hardware, not just Chromebooks in and out. For instance, 6 years ago, we opened up the iWing, and all of that equipment now is 6 years old, and it's all going south at the same time, and it's not able to handle the industry standard software that those 3rd year CTE classes require. When you've been on campus, you know it's the iWing that I'm talking about. And then your continued support for English learners is so impactful as our free and reduced price lunch and Title I population has dwindled due to population and due to boundary changes. Our take of the Title I is smaller, and most all of the Title I funding is designated toward a position that we believe is very important, a full-time bilingual parent coordinator. But that eats up so much of the budget that we don't have much left. We can't even pay for an additional classroom aide. So those are ways, in addition to your courageous leadership, thank you, that you could demonstrate board support in terms of policy. So thank you very much, and thank you. They're all my face masked Wildcats. The only one who's not face masked is Wilbur the mascot, and that's because when Wilbur wears a face mask over his mouth, he can't see, and the mascot costume. But I appreciate these kids posing for the now more than ever. We need your support and the support of our community. So thank you for listening, and I'll hand it over to Allison Silvestri, principal of Tide. Unless, oh, Bonnie, did I take your job?
You did great. I just am noting that we need to get a face shield for Wilbert.
Let
A
me
big
check.
one.
Thank you, Diane, and Diane, both of you. It's nice to see you. Before we hand things off, board comments or questions, any technical clarifying issues? I actually have one, Diane. I'm looking at the written report, not your slide deck, and so I don't want to blindside you, but if you've got somebody who can flip pages for you, on page 18 of your, and Bonnie, this is probably really more for you in terms of understanding the college and career preparedness indicator, but your data shows that you have 65% of your students who have met A through G under our dashboard, but under the California dashboard, only 53% have met college and career preparedness. How is it possible that you have, I mean, how can you have completed A through, I would think that the number of people who would be college and career prepared would be more than the people who completed A through G, who by definition would be college prepared, right? So that there might be people who also have done a pathway and have a career preparedness. So how can that be?
Bonnie.
Diane Mazzei, do you want me to answer that?
Absolutely, and I'll fill in anything, but yeah, absolutely. It's a combination of things, Alan. It really is.
That's the most complicated indicator on the whole dashboard. There are 6 different ways that you can meet that indicator. So despite what you said being the obvious way that it should be, it is easier to meet the college and career indicator than to meet the UC A through G indicator. In a nutshell, I think the primary reason for that is you can complete a CTE pathway without being UC A through G eligible and thereby meet the college and career indicator. But
Right,
it's
so
more
there should be-
detailed than that.
Right, but so there should be more people who meet the college and career indicator than who are A through G, right?
No. Yes. Sorry.
Well, that's what I'm
But
saying. is-
remember, our focus on CTE is new. So that's why that's why I'm going with our own dashboard.
Okay, that's all I'm saying is what is shown here is
Yeah.
that the people who met the CCI level is actually lower than the A through G numbers, and that seems counterintuitive to me.
Yeah, me too. I'll look
Okay.
at it.
Okay,
It does, and I don't know if you remember the dashboard, that has the multiple colors and all the priorities. It explains
Yeah.
how it's subtracted when a subgroup doesn't make the college indicator. So it takes away percentages.
okay. So it's like answering a question and losing points on the SAT if you get it
Yes,
wrong, right?
correct.
Okay. All right. Are you ready, unless there are other comments or questions, to introduce Principal Silvestri, Bonnie?
Here's Tide.
Okay, I'm going to start the timer now. All righty. So thank you for having us this evening. Tina and I have collaborated on this presentation. She'll be sharing her slide. Look at her, she's on it. So we are excited to be the one and only STEM magnet school in the district, and we're happy to present this evening as a small option for students and families who live within district boundaries. Tina and I did partner on this presentation. She, as the IVP, the instructional vice principal this evening, will be presenting highlights about our data and updates on our home learning. I will be going ahead and presenting on our school plan goals and how that ties to the governance team's goals, as well as to our next WASC and LCAP, because we were not required to write a WASC goal plan, which is typical in a normal cycle, but we're a new school. We will have a team coming out to accreditate our 10th grade this November. In the meantime, we did receive full accreditation for 4 years, so I'm very pleased. Hard work by the staff in a very short period of time, I believe about 3.5 months, if not less. And then finally, I will present on the board support that we need for Tide's success. So I'm going to turn it over immediately to my colleague, Tina Smith.
Hello. Okay. So this is our newest data. I'm not going to take the time to point out everything, but there's a few things that I want to point out. We have 58 ninth graders and 92 10th graders. Of them, 82 of them are male and 47 of them are females. We are aware of the disparity between those two genders, and we do have some things in place that we're trying to even that out. If you look, our two biggest ethnicities were roughly 43% Hispanic Latino and 15% white. And then there's other ethnicities sprinkled in there. We currently are at roughly 10% special education. And so on this next slide here, we took this data from last year because this is the data that we wrote with our WASC report, and that's what you have in front of you. So when you look at this data, it's very close. I'll point out some of the differences. This is the data from the WASC report that's in your hands. So 12% of our students qualified for 504s. Many of these students did have IEPs and they were put into 504s when they entered Tide based on either testing or like there was a combination of things there that happened that had students go from IEPs down to 504s. We have a total of, last year we had 13, this year we have 14 students that are special education, that qualify for special education. And that means that we have a full-time caseworker who works with them, as well as 2 study skills classes, one a 9th grade and one a 10th grade. And we also have a paraeducator who works with us 4 days. We just recently bumped her up to a 4th day. I know it says 3 days on this presentation, which it was at the time of we made the presentation. Now we've bumped her up to 4 days because our population of special education is increasing. When you look at our students, roughly 49% of them are English only speakers, with 29% that have been reclassified. That number will also go up because we just finished testing this morning, actually. And it's expected.
Tina, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to ask that you turn off your video because we're having major connectivity issues and you're being cut out a lot.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I know how your internet works.
Okay, hold on. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I left off with 49% are English only speakers, with 29 that have been reclassified to English proficient. We're expecting that number to go up because we just finished this morning our round of testing, and we're expecting somewhere between 3 and 5 students to be reclassified yet again.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, folks, if you couldn't hear everything. It's I know her connectivity way too well. So our school goals we set forth in our WASC plan, in short, building community and school climate and culture unique to Tide Academy, unique to a small STEM magnet school. As you all know, a great feature of our school is that we try and make all of our units of study interdisciplinary. So nothing is taught in a silo. So they don't learn just English and just social studies and just art, but everything comes together, and culminating project-based learning that try to resolve real world problems and with social action. So last year they did a Utopia project where they looked at situations such as our criminal justice system, transportation, housing, and then they tried to come up with a solution for the challenges faced by people living in those situations and working, traveling, whatever it might have been, healthcare being one of the top ones, go figure, during the time of COVID. We, of course, are an early college, early ready model, dual enrollment. Bonnie, thank you. Bonnie has been instrumental in supporting us during this time as we are working with Foothill in great partnership to get our dual enrollment program off the ground. So our kids, again, can enter any community college, 1 year, $1,000, full tuition paid, and then matriculate to junior year the very next year. We do a lot of career preparedness, And of course, we had until now during COVID a very unique schedule that included 3 nuclei and then a flex period. Unfortunately, that had to change during COVID just to meet the needs of our student body. In short, with the district, we thank you for supporting small schools. We will be taking these goals, and when we build out our action plan for WASC and for our LCAP in the year to come, we will be addressing all of these in those plans that we look forward to sharing with you, hopefully next spring. And we've been involved in MTSS starting as of last year, so we were very heavily involved. Of course, our school is built on RP and RJ. Restorative justice and restorative practices, because we love our acronyms in the field of education. Tina, I believe you have thank you, COVID slide.
So for COVID, we wanted to provide our staff time to analyze curriculum and kind of look at engagement pieces and focus on ways and methods to engage our students higher. So that takes time, right, for staff to build that into their classes. And we wanted to find ways for our students to connect to the school, even though we are not in class, in session. So we've come up with some very creative ways to do it. We still host lunch every single day and activities during lunches. We have many clubs that are going. And we have our activities director who's like working pretty constantly on trying to make things go. I know that's my timer, so I'm going. That
was my timer. We blew it.
The other thing is we put a lot of time and collaboration time into focusing on those interdisciplinary projects that Allison was talking about.
All righty, board, here is what we need from you, and I will wrap up and summarize. We really could use help with recruitment. We pulled out all the stops last year. I would love to be able to brainstorm, we've been brainstorming with our district office colleagues, but we need help with recruitment. We literally, and I'm especially at a distance, we're working harder than ever. We've got promotional videos, virtual tours. We're willing to do a small on-campus tours. We're trying to figure out shadowing, anything you can do to help us recruit. We know we want more students at Tide. So that's one major area that I am sleepless at night about. Of course, workforce programming, when we get back up and our partners are with us, we would love to reach out to you and ask who you know and who we can connect with, so all of our students can have mentors and we can start doing, again, our field trips. We had so many great things planned for late spring and they never came to fruition, which is a bummer. Small school differentiation, I hope we still stick with the fact that we can be different from the other schools, different programming, different curriculum, different textbooks. We really appreciate it because that's part of the great feature of Tide. I know acquisition of more land has been imperative, not only as we hope to grow, we will grow, but also to offer more programming after school, athletics. And then finally, once school resumes, we will need additional transportation to meet the needs of all of our kids.
So I don't know if you can hear us, Allison, but
Mute, I don't know what's happening.
We lost you at the last bullet point. And we're not hearing you now.
Allison has said in a few different conversations, pointed out that because their kids come from all over the district, if we for a time are needing to socially distance students when instruction starts up again, that transportation will be a challenge that we will need to help with at Tide.
And my apologies, it kept saying internet unstable. I don't know why. I'm the only person here and I've got strong internet. So I apologize if you couldn't hear me. I'm happy to do the follow-up during the Q&A part. And we're done.
So let me see whether board colleagues have any clarifying or questions of that nature. I just have one for you, Allison. I don't remember where we came out. Are you able to take new students to Tide into the sophomore class?
Yes, and can you hear me? I hate to say,
yes.
I feel like I'm a commercial. Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and we have.
Okay, great.
And we're happy to take freshmen in as well. We've had kids that, or students, excuse me, young men and women that the fit just wasn't at the larger schools. And we've also had students transfer into the area from other communities. So yes, we are open to taking them in and we are supporting them.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies, bad internet.
Bonnie?
Next up, we have Redwood. Stephanie Burton, take it away.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. We did do what we were assigned to do and give you 3 slides. Burton will be putting them up and then we'll talk a lot and hopefully within 7.5 minutes. So there's a couple of things that are different for us and I did put that in your notes. So we are supported through federal funds. The Every Student Succeed Act, ESSA provides funding for us. And because of that, we need to have a very specific type of report. So our report was based off the dashboard last year and was ready last year, which is why it might look a little bit different. Our funding sources have to go into the SIPSA and then it also has to be approved by the county office. And so super important that you remember that. Also, we received a 6-year WASC accreditation in 2018. And then we were one of the first schools to combine our WASC with the CSI Comprehensive Support and Improvement federal funding. And so we qualified at that time under high suspension rates, a crazy 26.9%, and then low college and career readiness because we weren't offering any, which makes it 0. And so now we are working on changing those numbers. Burton.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our data and what we've got going on. So the data that we use to inform this is the dashboard, like Stephanie said, the WASC, the data we had for WASC and our continuing self-study, as well as our SART. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the story behind that data. And some of which isn't going to be new to you all. Students who have low socioeconomic status at our school, we have 92% compared to the district's 38%. 32% of our students are English learners compared to the district's 14%. And it does not include, that number does not include reclassified students, and we do not have a newcomer program. So it's a pretty significant number. As far as conditions and climate on the dashboard, our suspension rate went from red to yellow. So it declined 17.7% from the 2018 dashboard to 2019. It should, if there were a new dashboard, it would be yellow again as it declined from 9.2 to 7.9%, which is getting a little bit more closely aligned with the district average. Our graduation rate is average from the past, from a rolling past 2 years. And that has declined. And that decline began when we first came in and stabilized our curriculum as well as our credits and the way that we distribute our credits. Some things that hurt us are the fact that fifth-year students do not count into our graduation rate. And we are actively trying to get students earlier on in their trajectory so that they can graduate on time and we can both serve their needs as well as our need to improve our graduation rate. Academic performance is obviously the most important data, and it's an ongoing conversation about getting relevant and actionable data for us. We do not have performance colors on the dashboard as there are not enough juniors in our school who take the SBAC. We are working towards getting relevant, actionable data that will help us be accountable. And we had great discussions with Diana about Diana Wilmot about building data points that are relevant for us. And we're really excited for that work to move forward so we can have really actionable academic data. College and career indicators, as Bonnie mentioned, is really complex. And they are a challenge as they don't necessarily fit continuation programs. What goes into that number includes, as we mentioned earlier, CTE pathways, junior SBAC scores, AP/IB courses, college credit courses, A through G completion, a lot of which doesn't quite fit with what our purpose is as a continuation school. And workforce readiness, including preparing students with resumes and all that is something that it's a great indicator that continuations across the state are trying to push forward to be included in the college career indicator. But unfortunately, due to COVID, the traction has kind of stalled. on that conversation. So that's not quite yet included in the college and career indicators. We are working, like I said, on the data points that will fit what we're talking about in the dashboard, as well as fit student needs. And what's really challenging for this college and career indicator, we have 0% of students who met those college and career indicators. And we didn't have, this was mostly because we didn't have a 2-year CTE pathway. The challenges with incorporating a 2-year CTE pathway is that it sometimes runs counter to what students need at our school. Students, for example, not needing the amount of credits necessary to complete the pathway, and they graduate before the pathway is done. So they won't count in that 2-year pathway because they're already graduated. Scheduling blocks in a small school schedule while trying to address students' other credit needs, student challenges with block schedule, which led them to be unsuccessful in school and come to us anyway. So those are all challenges, but this year we are implementing block classes to be able to incorporate a 2-year pathway into just 1 year. So we can try to meet the students' needs while also meeting the needs for our academic indicators. And now we have 2 pathways that are going with 4 cohorts of kids in those pathways. So we're really excited to get that work going and also to get better data in our collaboration with Diana Wilmot and moving forward.
Thanks, Burton. I'm going to talk a bit about how we're using the distance learning, hybrid learning, in-person revolving door in terms of looking at our school plan. So we were able to still continue to use our same, SIPSA, it's our WASC goals, it's our action plan. So obviously to support student academic performance, even though we don't have a great indicator for that, we know it's the most important thing that we can do. To get kids to school, we went from 69% to 80% in 2 years. We think we can continue that trajectory even with the distance learning. But, of course, it's a little bit different, but we're still really, really engaged in that. To support career pathways for students, like Burton said, we created a new master schedule that's really difficult, but we're trying to make it happen so kids can achieve that. And also to support and sustain healthy, safe, positive learning environments for all students. We began our equity work last year, which was a major focus of this, and we continue to do that. The thing that you must know, even though we've already approved it, is how do we fund those? Because that's what goes into the federal report. So to support goal 1, we are supporting it through using on-site instructional coaching, which is about distance learning at this time, additional support classes for students, which we're still giving everyone a study hall that comes in, lowering class sizes and adding additional mentoring and tutoring opportunities. Same thing that we had the year before. It seems to be working and we're going to continue with it. The goal 2 brought attendance from 69 to 80% in 2 years, and we have increased drastically positive attendance reinforcement through individual family orientations, increasing transportation opportunities, and funding our bilingual intervention counselor, who's great. Our goal 3 in the federal funding, we are continuing to work on pathways. Like I said, we created the new master schedule, supporting dual enrollment opportunities. We did a great outreach last spring, and then everything went away. And then we also are working with Tiffany Burkle to really get involved with the labor union, and it seems to be working, and we're getting the curriculum, and we're pretty excited about that. We have a new construction teacher, and he's great and has a lot of energy, and we spent the last 3 days sending out really cool construction kits. And then for continuing to work on the equity, really looking at how to include families and students in our work, because it's really a traumatic, challenging time. And so a lot of our language is about how to serve our students and families through trauma, but it's all framed in equity work. From board support, I would just say what I've heard from the other small schools, that we really want to continue the support to develop more alternative options for students who experience academic struggles and that need alternative learning environments. And then just a really thank you and continue please to support all small schools. And then ongoing support for the development of our CTE pathways. Like I said, Tiffany's been great and we need to continue to work with her to really try and get this happening. One of the data pieces that Diana and I were talking about 2 days ago was really identifying our stay rates. And a stay rate would be the data that is how long do students actually stay with us? What credits do they come in with? We can get credit accrual, but we really want to know where can we really focus on those students. I want to give a big shout out to the traditional schools. We ran 11th grade data on credit deficiency, and then the size of our schools, I was amazed at how small they were. Those lists are pretty darn small. So kudos to the big schools for really keeping their kids on track. And then we're going to try to identify what happens in 11th grade. So then they end up coming to us in 12th. But it said a lot for the schools, and we were really impressed.
Yeah, and to add to that, we felt very supported by the board because we've been allowed to refine and improve our program to meet our core goal, which is to meet student needs. We've just been supported left, right, and center with being able to flex what we do in order to best meet student needs, such as like the new grad requirements that we now have, where we took off 5 credits off of world history. So we want continued support for that flexibility to meet student needs. And specifically in the context of distance learning, attendance and access is obviously top of mind for a lot of us, as some of our colleagues have already attested to. We see right now we're really trying to tackle 2 buckets of kids, one with the same strategy. So one with access issues, so students who lack consistent access to the internet, lack their own space in order to be able to attend school regularly and be able to focus. And the other bucket is students with support or structure issues. So for example, they need teacher help, they need an adult there to be able to answer certain questions for them, troubleshoot, and their parents may be working, or students who need a little bit more routine. And it's hard to build that at home when they have 4 other siblings who are running around who they may need to take care of. One of our students actually has 2 sets of twins that he helps his grandmother take care of, a set of 4-year-olds and a set of 6-year-olds. So it's very difficult for those students. So trying to figure out what strategies we can put into place and thinking creatively to support those students.
That's it for us. If you have questions about more distance learning and what we're doing, we'll answer that in the questions later.
Any clarifying questions from board colleagues? Can you remind the board, Stephanie, of what or Burton, of what the 2 CTE pathways are?
We have construction and culinary.
Thanks. Okay.
Menlo Atherton High School, take it away.
Rawr.
Good evening. The RAR was for the Bears, I assume. Good
That's
evening,
right.
board and Interim Superintendent Leach and Cabinet. I'm pleased to let you know before I start sharing the screen that my wonderful administrative team, Carl Loosecoat, Stephen Emmy, Emily Rigotti, Nick Muse, are here and have all had an amazing hand in this plan. And I know we have some of our fabulous staff attending as well. So I'm going to share the screen with our plan, and then I love the stories behind the data and anecdotes. So I do want to kick it off. I do have hope for the future despite the debacle we saw last night. MA, we had a very healing day today with some opportunity for community circles. Full credit for organizing those goes to our Social Justice Committee and our wonderful mental health support specialist, Shonda Nickerson, and our administrative team. We discussed the article that appeared in our Mark magazine in February about the race riots at Menlo Atherton in the 60s. And then we also had space and time for students to react to the Breonna Taylor ruling. The reason I tell you I have hope is their empowerment comments, reflections were so insightful that I believe we might see some future politicians, students of color, women making future decisions. So I have a lot of faith and hope in that. So I wanted to kick it off with that. Also, I'm now going to, as we kick things off, introduce our wonderful instructional vice principal, who's going to review the data. He is embroiled in it daily. So he's going to kick it off by highlighting what we based our site plan on. Carl Loosecoat.
Thank you, Simone. Yeah, on a continued positive note, here's our data, our 2020 A through G data, which were and 2019 CAS scores, which we're really proud of. And at 68.4% of our students meeting eligibility last year is, I believe, the highest rate we've had in maybe 10 years. And you'll notice that each subgroup, almost all of them represent a 3-year upward trend, which we're really proud of as well. The CAS scores from 2019 also show significant gains in ELA and math from the year prior to that. It's interesting to note that this is the same, the students that take the CAS scores in 2019 are juniors. The students who graduate in 2020, that's the same group of kids. So just a strong class. And I'd also like to point out that the data is really reflective of work from, site plans from 2 to 3 years ago. This is reflective of work that our English teachers have been doing, and our math teachers and our US history teachers, who have formed really strong collaborative teams and really kind of honed in, our history teachers really with a laser focus on how to do document analysis, primary source analysis. That translates to students doing well on the CASP. That's our math program, who for a couple years now has worked really hard to bring in more open-ended problem solving into their math classes and give students more opportunities to articulate their thinking in math and not just do rote problem solving. So that's been going on for a couple of years. Our English team and their collaborative teams have brought in more nonfiction, more argumentative writing. Our junior teachers in particular have spent a tremendous amount of time working as a team to align curriculum, to build assessments that are similar to what students will see on the CASP. So this data really is reflective of a lot of student hard work and a lot of teacher hard work and staff work. So I just want to point that out. Obviously, we're proud of some things here. There's obviously some data points here that we recognize need to grow. You see a math CAS score for students with IEPs at 2%. Our long-term English learners are perhaps our most vulnerable students in the school, really struggle on some of these assessments. Although, A through G rates are showing an increase here. So there's some things we're proud of, and there's some things we need to continue to work on, obviously, and that leads to our goals. Simone, can you go to the next page? Just to take a stab at the question too about the California dashboard and what makes someone college and career ready. When we do A through G, we focus on grades and grades over 3 years. When the California dashboard does college and career ready, they look at CASP scores. And there's multiple ways to get that. And one way is to be met or exceeded on both English and math. And so if you have 55% of your students are only meeting in math, that's going to bring down the number of students who are A through G. And I think there's other indicators such as, how many do you complete a CTE pathway? And as Diane Mazet pointed out, it's a relatively new indicator. There's not a lot of students, I think, that actually complete the CTE pathway, and something we continue to work on. So it's a very much different indicator than the pure A through G eligibility that the UC system uses. In any case, here's our 4 goals, which I think tie to our data nicely. The first one, increase the number of students who are college and career ready and A through G eligible, which again, we feel really proud at. 68.4 is a great number, one we hope to continue to see grow. But this is also about focusing on our subgroups: African-American students, Pacific Islander students, Hispanic and Latino students, and students with special needs. So again, most of those subgroups demonstrated an upward trend for the past 3 years. So the growth last year was positive. Still, there's a lot of growth to be had. Increase the performance of long-term English learners. And again, as I said, I think this is some of our most vulnerable students in the school, and who struggle on exams like the CASP, who struggle to get A through G eligible. That's what the data reflects. We've really got to kind of focus our efforts there. Increase the performance of students with IEPs, with a focus on those students in mainstreamed co-taught classes. And the fourth one is increase overall student engagement, well-being and engagement in school as measured by annual student parent surveys. It's not in this slideshow, but I'd also point out that data relating to suspension rates is also on a continual decline, whether you're looking at the California dashboard, which measures the number of students who are suspended once, or you're looking at our school dashboard, which measures total suspensions, which also reflects a significant decline. So really proud of that data as well. So those are our school goals. And if we go to the next slide, we can talk about some of our strategies and how they align to the LCAP. So if you talk about strengthening quality instruction, there's several district initiatives that we feel are going well and appreciate the district support. We call it Biology for All, whereas we're in our second year of no longer having advanced integrated science. And we're hopeful that initiatives like that and the algebra initiative where we no longer have readiness courses is providing greater access to A through G content, is increasing a community that doesn't track students and building a stronger community in our school. So really, really happy with those initiatives. There's a couple site kind of initiatives that I'd like to point out, and that's the AS English 1 and English 1 and the chemistry alignment. These two collaborative teams are working really closely together, where you're taking AS English 1 and English 1. These guys, they're doing the same text. They're starting to assign the same assignments. They're starting to look at using similar rubrics. So really aligning curriculum similarly in AS chemistry and chemistry as they work with NGSS standards, to the point where we're really looking at how are we providing really high quality access and rigor to all students, not just students per se in an AS English or an AS chemistry class. I'm really excited about the work that those teams are doing. In terms of using an equity lens, clearly we have a really strong and robust social justice committee. And we've been looking at bringing on a consultant. And it's a really impressive process that we've gone through and that the committee has really guided us through as administrators. And we're looking to bring on somebody that can work with us for a couple of years to talk about bias, our bias in the classroom. How do we build community amongst staff? How do we build greater conversations amongst ourselves and in the classroom? And really what Simone pointed out, these were two fantastic conversations we had today. One which was all staff and one which was a mixture of students and staff. It really kind of demonstrated, I think, the power of building community and listening to student voice, including student voice. And I'm hopeful that helps, that impacts what happens in the classroom, that impacts the greater community as a whole. We're also one of the pivots in the school plan. As we've gone to distance learning, there's been a greater need for standards-based grading. And so we've had teachers participate in district training in June, but we also provided our own consultant for teachers to work with around standards-based grading. And I think, if I remember the data, we've got roughly 60 teachers experimenting with standards-based grading right now. And really the challenge is how do you do authentic assessments while you're in distance learning? And that's really what they're trying to figure out. And then how do you translate that into grading now? Obviously, algebra and geometry initiatives are about equity as well, as it's about providing everybody equitable access. And finally, the last one, in ensuring we have a positive environment and all students are receiving support. Clearly, we're working where our AVPs have done a fantastic job reaching out, developing a re-engagement plan, using all of our support staff and programs on campus to reach out to kids. They work tirelessly. We've worked several years ago, we worked with restorative practices. And it's been interesting as our social justice committee has really asked for that to come back. And so we're looking to, after taking a kind of year break, we're looking to bring on a little bit more work with restorative practices, both with staff and in the classroom. And so from now, I'm going to pass it off to Principal Kendall, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl. So we wanted to also address how COVID is impacting our work and progress towards our goals. And I'm actually pretty proud we've been able to still focus on some important instructional and professional development pieces this year. Again, our site plan did change to include focus on the implementation support for standards-based grading and authentic assessment, and clearly all the support from the district PD for online teaching and learning. A focus on the social justice and equity work is a core piece of professional development. Of course, technology integration into curricular which could have very exciting future implications. And then moving forward with our planned parent engagement support and initiatives. So we're with some school site funding, Title I money, we're hiring a part-time parent engagement coordinator to work with our bilingual parent coordinator for outreach to our Pacific Islander and African American families as well. Challenging impacts are there, right? It's clearly inhibiting our ability to serve English learners, and I'll speak to that in just a minute. Engaging students who aren't connecting virtually, maintaining our sense of school community, and also reinventing school virtually. So Carl referred to the wonderful work our vice principals have done with the attendance and re-engagement report. We've now massaged and maneuvered, plus the report from Diana Wilmot that identified 176 students who were not engaging more than 50% of the time in some way. We have categories. We know 38 students need in-person support to access Wi-Fi, among other things, but that is their number one thing. I've had students visit to pick things up and they've said, I cannot work at home. We have a pod of 18 students in the Aspirations Advocate program who could benefit, and some overlap into our other categories. 45 students could benefit from in-person academic support. 26 probably need more intensive one-to-one support because they have IEPs. We have 4 foster youth who could use some case management, and 6 who could probably thrive in independent study because they're working full-time. A possible 17, 18 who might get a boost by enrolling at Redwood, and 7 who can go to adult school. So I want to give you those numbers because I want you to know how detailed we are looking at each individual student. And what was really impressive about the attendance and re-engagement plan and the spreadsheet Diana gave us, we were able to identify intervention and outreach for every single one of the students on that list, minus the 6 that were pending being dropped or had been dropped. So I know we're way over time here. We're a big school though. Okay, so last thing I'll wrap up with, board support. Thank you. I know that you have made courageous decisions in a very tough time that is impacting the whole system. Just a reminder of the COVID-19 realities. We all need support. I know we're at that time in year where morale starts to, the honeymoon's over and the reality of screen time and Zoom classes is setting in for students, for our staff for sure. And for our parents who are supporting students at home, if students are lucky to have that support. And then, so we want to continue to do all of these things well to make sure students access the best experience. Support for the social justice and equity work that is going to inform anti-racist policies, practices, and programmatic changes, which will take courage. And district funding support for parent engagement, community liaisons, for sites. I don't think I'm just speaking for Menlo Atherton, but I really think we need to start to look at how we support these initiatives with people. So thank you very much for your time this evening. Oh, I will leave you quickly with the kind of temperature check during one of the community circles today. And the good news is most students who participated were able to respond that they were doing okay. Some were tired though, so thank you.
Okay, but tired. I think that's about the best we can hope for in the present environment. Any clarifying or technical questions from board colleagues? Y'all are doing great. These are very, very substantive presentations, and so thank you very much. Fine.
Carl Mont, you're up.
Get myself off mute there. Thank you, President Weiner, fellow trustees, cabinet, and interim superintendent Leach. I was a bit surprised at the order of this presentation because I was sure that I was the longest winded during the opening school report. So thank you, Sean, for going last. And I also appreciate that because you're also a very tough act to follow, Sean. So I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet. I want to give a huge recognition to my new instructional vice principal, Ms. Gay Buckland, for putting this together. And I think she did it so I would be short and sweet in the presentation. So She took on this assignment being new to Carlmont. She got to know the school very well because of it. And so she was very pleased to do this. So first, we're going to start with some data. You're going to see some similarities with especially the core comprehensive sites as far as how students are performing across the district. That's what I'm starting to see, the way that these slides are put together and what you're seeing. So, the A through G completion rate is there. You see a huge jump for us from 63.4, which was 2019, to 78.7 in 2020. That's the most recent one. So there are a number of factors that go into the A through G completion rate, but I really think that, this was the first year that our foundation was able to fund an additional counselor to lower our caseload for our counselors. And I think that plays a huge factor in getting students A through G eligible to make sure that they're signing up for the right courses and getting the completion done. So a huge thank you to CAF for doing that. So you can see there where our concerns are that, our general population has this great A through G rate. It looks wonderful, but we have a lot of work to do with the subgroups. The EL population, our students with IEPs, and our socioeconomic disadvantage. You see some percentages there that's usually where they hover, and they bounce up and down, and their percentages fluctuate more from year to year because they're such a small population. So fewer students impact the percentage greater in these cases. You see our SED population had a pretty good jump from 36.5 to 57.6, but we still have a lot of work to do to focus on those groups and bringing those up. Our SPED students went down, and so year to year, again, that's a big concern as to why it goes down. So, we're looking at the data, we're looking at what we can do to improve in those areas, and it's part of our WASC and site plan goals as well. Our attendance data, 95.9% overall. The other populations are lower. They're still good, better than some areas, but I think there's room for improvement in that as well. Our CASP scores are very similar as far as how our general population of students are performing versus our subgroups that we are most concerned about and what we are trying to improve in those areas. Our school plan goals are just like everybody else, aligned with our WASC. We are in a mid-year cycle. This is the third year of a 6-year accreditation for us. And, we're doing some work and we were getting some things done that I'll get into, but, goal number 1, to improve academic achievement for EL, SPED, and FPD. Those are the groups that you saw that were performing below those on the general population and the data slide prior to this. Impact of COVID obviously has increased the challenges, but we've had to change how we reach out. I want to give a lot of credit to Greg Patner and the AVP team for creating an attendance outreach team where they collect information and they look at data regularly that's given to them from information from teachers, and they have created a team in the office that consists of our secretaries, our instructional associates, our GISs, our parent liaisons, and our attendance clerk. And they're reaching out with phone calls, trying to get a hold of students, trying to get them re-engaged, trying to get them back on track as much as possible, trying to figure out, is it a technical issue? Do they need a different Chromebook? Do they need a hotspot? What is it that they need to stay engaged and stay with us in this distance learning path? The second goal is to improve preparation of students for post-secondary life. And obviously COVID has impacted this as well. You don't see as many job intern experiences. Some of the field trips, different things that happen during in-person are limited. And the last goal for us, third goal, is improve overall student mental health. And with the distance learning and the impact it's having and a lack of human connection our students having with each other and with our staff, I think has increased our mental health concerns with students and how they are coping and dealing with this. And it's caused our counseling staff, our intervention counselor, and our SOS counselor to be working astronomical hours, working with kids. I mean, they're talking to students, they're talking to parents that have run away in the middle of the night. They're, the 5150s, so it's really extended their workday, and that's been a big concern of ours as well. Trying to get to the next slide here. So the way that our school goals align with the governance team goals are very similar. Goal number 1, strengthen quality instruction by improving engagement and rigor for all students. We created a tutoring center, which is now virtual, which includes peer tutors through Zoom. So we've enhanced that during distance learning to try and reach more people. So I think that's been wonderful. We created flex time before we went to distance learning and office hours now. So that helps in that goal. Professional development offerings, increased course offerings for illustration and design, and CTE marketing communications are 2 pathways that we bolstered during that time. Goal number 2, use an equity lens to bolster student outcomes by addressing institutional and instructional practices which perpetuate inequalities in student outcomes. Our technology distribution plan, attendance initiative that is headed by our ABCs. We hired an additional attendance clerk to help track and keep track of students. That attendance clerk is also a part-time parent liaison that does a wonderful job communicating out to families through various means, and also phone calls, and it's just been a wonderful addition to our support team. Goal number 3, ensure all students receive appropriate academic, behavior, social, emotional support, the MTSS system. Our Bell schedule pilot was really put on hold because in 18-19 we started this process, and last year we had pilot schedules, which were a Bell schedule that included a block schedule. It was a modified block where we were traditional up until last year. So that really is put on hold. In a sense, it kind of prepared us for this because our teachers that didn't have any experience teaching in a block before had some experience last year during our pilot process. So I think that helped prepare them for these blocks that you're seeing in distance learning that are 70 minutes long. The additional counselor on team and the mental health task force that we created has been instrumental in this area as well. Getting to I've got 2 other people in meetings. My wife is in a board meeting for her district, and my son is doing distance learning at San Francisco State. So for some reason, I'm not able to move it to the next slide. Let me just bear with me for a second. It's really going to cause me to go over time.
Yeah, let the record show that Ralph Crane cannot be held responsible for the seconds it takes to forward his slide.
Wow, this is not going well. Do you see that little spinning wheel of death I have going on?
Okay, I'm sharing it. I'm sharing it from my.
All right, well, let me.
This is your next slide, Ralph. I'm sharing it from my screen.
You're on board support.
Board support. Okay, well, I'm going to have to go by memory because my computer is just frozen here. So board support is also similar to what you heard from other schools. One was the funding model for our SPED and co-teaching model. It's kind of like a supply and demand curve. It works well when you have a large number of students, and so you have a large staff that can provide co-teaching classes. But when you have fewer co-teaching teachers that can provide co-taught classes, it becomes a challenge to make sure that we're offering these co-taught classes in the percentages that we're in the agreement. Oh, here I see it now. Okay, so that's one area of need for us, is to look at that co-teaching funding model and to see if there's a way that can make more sense for a site like ours that has a smaller number of SPED students. We're looking for more support in our bilingual instructional program for our bilingual instructional associate. I think we get $17,000 through the funding for those for that, but I find other funds to have a full-time bilingual instructional associate, which is very instrumental, especially in this time. The work that our BIA is doing, reaching out to families and students, just second to none. Additional classified support in community positions, such as a parent coordinator, that has been instrumental when we found the right person in place for that. And I found some funding for Kat Ortiz. She's done a great job connecting our community back to the school in ways that we haven't seen before. And also attendance. Our attendance clerk with over 2,300 students is really getting buried with the amount of work that is happening, especially this year with distance learning and all the confusion over attendance. She has been working really long hours, and the extra help there would definitely come in handy. And then technology was mentioned by other schools as well. So the long-term technology plan but also to fund more positions at the site to help with technology and the need of the technology. Because if we're going to go with a one-to-one potential device or more devices on campus that we're seeing that our tech support is run real thin, running around from class to class and helping teachers and students with the technology. So again, thank you for your time. I know I went a little over. I apologize, but hopefully Sean can make that up. And again, Sean's a tough act to follow, and he's an excellent closer. So I'll leave it to questions, or we'll go straight to Sequoia.
Do we have any clarifying or technical questions from board members? All right then, so everybody strap in, buckle in, and we'll hand things over to Sean. Sean, you are still on mute.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? I really don't like these expectations that have been set for my presentation. So Ralph, I'm gonna get you back. I have Kristen. Can you share the presentation just so that I can refer to my notes? I want to just thank. Can you turn that light off, please? Can you? So I want to thank Kristen for joining me tonight for this. And I want to thank the Board of Trustees and Superintendent Leach and the cabinet staff. Ton of support in putting together this report. Been really happy with all the ways that the district has met requests we've had for data, requests that we've made for various other clarifying questions or needs. So thank you, especially Bonnie. I really appreciate everything you've done to put these together. Okay, so Kristen, can you share that slideshow, the 2021 school plan presentation?
It's loading.
Okay, everything's loading slowly. I'll go ahead and get started because I think it's.
I'm sharing it.
There we
I'm
go.
I'm sharing it, Sean.
Thank you.
President Weiner, you're the best. I appreciate it. Okay, so our site plan and our WASC goals and our action plan, strong coherence between all three of those documents. That's important for what we do. Our goals remain largely unchanged from the last time we had this conversation. We're focused on academic achievement, we're focused on literacy, and we're focused on mathematical reasoning. We're using the same measures to chart progress in those areas. Our critical areas of need, if you're using WASC language, if you're using site plan language, our goals are based on where we see the largest inequities and outcomes among our different subgroups, particularly English learners, students with special needs, students with disabilities, and our Latino population. We also use our students who are free reduced lunch eligible under federal guidelines. We look at the same data from year to year, A to G eligibility, the results of our CASP, the percentage of students who enroll in one or more IB classes, and the results of the all school standards aligned assessment in math and literacy, which is now a district wide assessment in standards in math and literacy. That's the ICA. These measures for the most part are summative, right? So in other words, the class of 2020 is off to take on the world. We don't get another shot at improving their A to G rate, IB participation, et cetera. The exception is the ICA, which provides actionable data for our teachers. This is formative data. We really appreciate the efforts of the district curriculum and instruction department in standardizing the process for reviewing this data, because it gives our teachers concrete steps to address trends that are revealed in findings that they uncover through their own data diving. So I think it's a good and consistent set of data that we rely heavily on. And we also look at the dashboard for all kinds of different trends and things that jump out. We all have kind of our pet data points that we look at, I think, both as schools and as educational leaders, whether in the classroom or in administration. Then we go to the next slide. I can't say that our school mission, goals, vision was designed to withstand the disruption that we've experienced over the last 6 months. But they've proven themselves to be remarkably robust in providing our direction and focus through the myriad adjustments that we've made. I appreciate the patience and consistency with which the governing board has provided Sequoia over the years to tackle this work in a way that seeks to deeply alter the achievement trajectory for our students and our school. The goals that we have, the mission and the vision, of course, remain grounded in the shared values we have as a community, explicitly. And you guys are probably familiar with these by now because you hear me articulate them whenever I can. There's this belief that all students want to be successful in learning. All people want to be successful in learning. There's a second belief that there are barriers impeding this success. And when we talk about school, there are a lot of barriers. There are linguistic barriers, there are systemic barriers, there are racial barriers, socioeconomic barriers, and institutional barriers. As educators, we are duty bound to confront these barriers, move them out of the way, push kids over them, around them, or through them. And finally, grades and feedback are best when they purely reflect the extent to which mastery of standards has been demonstrated by students. So these are what drive our goals. And you see our school goals, like I said, they have not changed, but those goals inform the 8 key areas of our action plan. So we've identified our goals, and then we have our 8 areas of our action plan. Within the language of the site plan, these are our strategies. Okay, so when we look at our action plan under our WASC 6-year plan, we look at our site plan, there's a little bit of a difference in language that you encounter. Strategies are the same thing as our action plan. We live with our action plan. We update these at regular intervals based on the progress we make. This is where our site council and our SLT, which recently shifted to a representative model to provide a broader range of input across departments. This is where we've engaged parent groups. I'm proud of the success we've had engaging our ELAC parents in particular over the last year, creating, I think, a robust dialogue about what our school goals, mission, and how we implement resources towards that vision. We're going to continue this year with the work we began last year in building a core of parent leaders within ELAC. They do everything from organize our meetings and try and build membership to actually participating and in some cases leading classroom walkthroughs. So I've got ELAC parents leading walkthroughs using walkthrough tools so that they can be as informed as possible what it actually looks and feels like to be a student at Sequoia. And then when they sit down in a meeting and they have the principal in my rusty Spanish explaining what our school goals and what our action items are, they can visualize what that means to their students in the classroom because they've seen firsthand what kinds of things happen in those classrooms. And I think that the energy of our ELAC over the last year is a testament to that, some success in that area. We can go on to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about these strategies, which are also our action items against the coherence there. We use different words, whether we're talking in WASC language or whether we're talking in single plan for student achievement language, but strategies and action items. For us, it's identifying differentiated instructional strategies that can be implemented school-wide, building out a living website resource bank for teachers to access things to help students with disabilities, English learners, broad, diverse classrooms that make for a rich experience, but are also challenging for teachers in terms of meeting the needs of all the kids in the room, increasing the rate of academic success and school engagement amongst long-term English learners. We have been working hard over the last 3 years. Again, not a quick fix, but getting as many of our core teachers trained in IM, which is I'm blanking on it.
Constructing
meaning, CM, sorry. It's got a lot on in the brain here. Constructing meaning, right? So we're looking at how we do specific strategies to meet the needs of English learners in core academic subjects. How we assess grades 9 through 11 with common assessments. I talked a little bit about that already, looking at data from the ICA, strengthening articulation with partner schools to align standards and strategies. We're going to be looking, I think, through the lens of some of the equity and diversity work that our focus groups are doing this year, and with particular nod to our outstanding counseling department, who's put together a set of proposals that I'm looking forward to hearing later next week around how we can continue to strengthen articulation with partner schools. Again, Sequoia, just like every other school in this district, has a lot of different communities with which we partner, communities with different needs, but communities with, I think, strong assets to add to what we do at Sequoia. And so we always want to use that asset model as opposed to a deficit model, especially when we're working with different middle schools and setting the tone for a culture where equity in access and equity in outcomes rules the day. We're looking at, of course, equitable grading practices. You guys are all freely just calling it standards-based grading now. That's great. We've always used the language equitable grading practices when we talk about reporting student achievement at Sequoia, aligned to progress towards mastery of standards or demonstration of IB learner profile characteristics. We want our grading to be equitable, and we've found that we've had great success in standards-based grading as an equitable system for keeping students working. Again, it's about formative and not summative. There's a great, I think, observation that someone made, that kids will start a level 50 times on a video game until they pass it, but they'll give up after one bum score on an algebra quiz. What's going on there? Understanding and examining factors leading to a strong climate of balance and wellness. That's another one of our action items. Speaks again to some of the MTSS and mental health work that's not so much present in our site plan, but that does inform, I think, the work that we're trying to do to build community, to make Sequoia a great place to be a student and a teacher and a staff member. And then increasing the percentage of free reduced lunch eligible students enrolled in one or more IB courses, again, specifically speaking as a action item, or in the language of SPSA, a strategy. And then our final strategy is looking at how to formalize policies, procedures, and processes to evaluate and monitor the effectiveness of programs. And that's, I think, both the data that we look at from year to year, those 4 big ones that I talked about earlier, but then also we're really looking to grow in how we look at data and what kinds of data we look at in order to define what success means. I think that's an area where we can grow. Let's go on to the next slide. I think we enjoy remarkable consistency with this governing board, and I'm very grateful for that. I know you are familiar with our action plan. I know you're familiar with the programs that we have in place to support success towards these goals. And I would like to speak a little bit to how we're looking this year to address what I interpret for me as kind of a flattened curve. I look at our A to G numbers, frankly, they've gone up over time incrementally, but they've been steady, I think is what I would say, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. Our CAS results improving incrementally, but there's an achievement chasm that remains among our significant subgroups. And certainly if we're looking at the increments in which that chasm is closing, we're going to be here for a long time. Our IB enrollment rates, probably where we best demonstrate the highest degree of relative success in bridging the equity gap, have also not showed significant growth in the past 2 years. So what's going on there? What can we do differently? What can we identify as areas where we can maybe push a little bit further along? There's a misconception, I think, that Sequoia's staff or Sequoia's culture is sort of the go along team. I would argue that Sequoia's staff is among the most highly reflective and critical group of professionals that I've ever worked with. We are constantly asking if what we're doing is enough. What more could we be doing to serve our students? I share in this proclivity, and what more, I'm constantly thinking of, is this enough? And I'm critical about these action plans. Whenever I go through the process of preparing for a presentation like this, or digging deep into some of this work like we're doing in our WASC, this is a WASC mid-cycle year for us, I'm asking, what more can we be doing to make serious progress towards our aspirational vision of equity in action, equity and outcomes. We're going to be leveraging our WASC process, as well as the work driven by our equity and diversity focus groups. We had 66 staff members volunteer 2 hours of their time this morning to dive into this work. It was exciting. It was inspiring. We funded a second college counselor, bilingual. The intention is to broaden the influence of the College and Career Center among staff and with families. We continue to channel categorical resources towards English learners in the form of classroom staff. We want those students to feel that support every day. So I'm left kind of wondering about the extent to which the outcomes that seem most stubborn when I look at the data are determined by systemic or programmatic structures in this district, in this county, in this state, in this country. I'm watching carefully how the programmatic changes that are underway in math and science and social studies bode for outcomes. I'm very optimistic and very bullish on the work that's been done already, especially among our teachers. Both our algebra initiative team, our geometry initiative team are doing very difficult very time consuming, but great work this year. I had a conversation with a teacher on one of those teams, and the danger of having conflict when you're trying to decide which procedural skills are we going to emphasize, given that we have limited time, limited access to students, and we want to sort of put more attention on application, more attention on concept. So everybody's going to have an opinion about that. And what happens when you have collegial professionals working together is it's really hard sometimes to have those conflicts unless there's a great degree of trust and a great degree of structure. So I'm inspired that our teachers are willing to take the time and engage even when they don't necessarily agree, because that's where the really interesting work comes from. I pay very close attention to the variance in our dashboard data between students. Here's my pet data point. Parents who graduated from college or graduated from post-college and parents who did not complete high school. I'm always watching of all the sort of different gaps I can look at. How do we look in the various dashboard categories with those particular groups? And I think we do outperform, which I think validates a great deal of the work we do in terms of framing conversations around equity, around cultural relevance in both our pedagogy and our curriculum, and then also in terms of the culture of the school, and again, having that really strong set of values and really strong vision. I'm looking forward, though, this year to identifying some new measurables through the work we're doing both with WASC and the Equity and Diversity focus groups. I really hope some of that data can be more formative and actually create actionable concrete things that we can immediately implement in the same way that the ICA is. I hope that we can identify qualitative measures that will allow us to flesh out some of these quantitative measures that we rely so heavily on. And likewise, I really hope that we can continue to have conversations district-wide, or that the governance team will continue to support our site-based efforts to detrack classes and derail the systems that generate outcomes that are so heavily predictable based on race and socioeconomic status. And I think, you know, the board has done a great job of supporting the ambitious and aspirational goals of Sequoia. I would ask you to continue to look at ways to prioritize staffing at the sites. When we talk about mental health, we need practitioners more than we need theoreticians. When we talk about our students for whom language is a barrier, bilingual aids are helpful. We need more of them. Technology, we need more of them. If we're going to drive some of these initiatives home and do the kinds of really time-consuming but deeply human connective work that we do to keep every student connected to the school, support and administration is key. And I also want to encourage you. I've heard lots of great things over the past few months. Hey, plant that anti-racist flag in the ground. Hold fast, because the winds that resist dismantling systems of oppression and marginalization will start blowing. And they will not announce themselves as such, but they will blow, and they will blow hot. Continue to foster an environment which draws a diverse, high caliber professional core staff who want to work hard and with purpose. That's, I think, an area where we excel as a district, and I hope that we excel as a site. And I know that you all set the tone for that, and I very much appreciate it. So that's my presentation this year. I will talk about the COVID stuff. I have a bunch of stuff I'm happy to talk about, but I was thinking we were going to get to that in questions. And thank you for listening.
Excellent. So let me see if there are any technical or clarifying questions about either your report, your plan, Sean, or your presentation. If not, appreciate again the very thoughtful presentation. I'd like to go ahead and now begin our discussion, a broader discussion, board reactions to this. We did not have again, presentations, regular presentations from our bargaining unit. So I thought maybe I would just check first to see if either Ms. Salvatore or Ms. Horton, whether Edith or Grace wanted to intervene. You're welcome to do so later, so it's not a command performance, but raise your flag if you do. Otherwise, I will turn it over to board colleagues. Okay, seeing no other little blue hands, I'm going to give the Zoom to Trustee Thompson, to be followed by Trustee Sarver, to be followed by Trustee Nori.
The blue hands are coming up now. Let me begin with kudos to the two Allens, Bonnie and Crystal, I think, for the format the presentations today. I think that's for really heavy content. I think it's a good way for us to discuss it. And also I was one who is a great advocate for electronic papers, electronic publications, but I have to tell you, like Alan, I was nostalgic to get the big packet, and I do like the ability to turn pages over and highlight in yellow. That was really, really nice. But we shouldn't do it all the time. For me, this is one of the most important reports of the year, and so I'm grateful to all of you for the extra time you put into it. I want to share an overall reaction, which is just two or more thumbs up. The documents were uplifting to read, and they provide tremendous evidence of the commitment you have and the smarts you bring to a difficult task. Specifically, I think I'd like to comment that it's really gratifying to see the alignment of district goals and school level goals, and that's supplemented by the creativity and individual innovation that happens at each school. So it was really quite wonderful. I wanted to offer comments and questions in 5 areas. Alan, if we've got an hour to do the board discussion, that gives us better than 10 minutes, but I won't do that much. The first little one, it was interesting, was about the A through G rates versus college and career on the dashboard, because I had a similar question as Alan raised, and appreciated Carl's comments on that. I actually would like to learn a little more, and I'd point to the data point that stood out for me interestingly was at MA, but it's true at other schools too, I think, where when you look at A through G, MA has this tremendous 3-year gain, and a big gain in the last year for the Latinx population as an example. But the California dashboard, the college and career actually dropped for that group. So one, I'd like to learn more. I think that's important because we should think about a limited number of indicators that we're looking at and which ones are most important to us. So I'll take that on as an individual assignment, but maybe it comes back to the board in some discussion format. Or I just saw Bonnie smile. Maybe you're going to help me with that distinction. 2 for me is a question you can answer, I think, in some ways, is what happens to the plans after they come to us. There were comments about working with site councils. I understand plans are sometimes most important for the work that goes into the developing them, but specifically I'm wondering whether principals and the rest of the school leadership teams actually have a chance to look at one another's plans. And part of this comes out of an observation that we tend to look at, we incent and I think we encourage site level innovation, and I understand that's important. I don't know how much we encourage or know about site level or collaboration across departments, or whether we recognize innovations that happen at one school that begin to migrate to other schools. So that's meant to be a question for anybody to address, as well as a value statement, I guess, about sharing the plans with one another. Diane, you know, for some reason you have big presence on my screen. I don't know what that means. You're ready to address the question, or?
Teachers collaborate now on Wednesdays, I think more than they ever did. There's pockets of collaboration, the biology for all, and then the math initiatives. And then English teachers, usually by grade level because of the Common Core. So I think collaboration is strong. Oh, and with CTE as well, because with Tiffany Burkle's presence and the funding stream, they have to collaborate. In terms of working, I think the principals, we rely heavily on the presentations and then get ideas.
All right, I'll move on then. If I have a big ask about the presentations, it involves the analysis and annual review sections that strike me as being relatively light, especially on the narrative side. That I have a sense that you all you've done the analysis formally or informally. You know why you're changing things. You know what's not working and what is working. But I'd love to see in the development of these things over years. I hate to ask more work of you, but I think it would be valuable to have for the board to have a better understanding of your analysis of past years. That.
Okay.
Ani, are you writing this down since you'll be maybe shepherding these things in the future?
You got it.
I often know if nobody writes something down, like it doesn't happen. It's like if it's not on Insta or Facebook, the event didn't even take place, right? So.
So 4 and 5, and I'm done with this. 4 is about the budget. I noticed that all the plans, I think, include some line item detail about money spent on projects, and some of them have totals. The general question is the budget information actually a good indicator of investments we make in the site plans? It's sort of my sense that it may not be a good indicator.
I don't understand that question. Can you say more?
Yeah, I mean, one way of evaluating budget in particular is whether there's an impact for the money spent, right? The reports given to us give at least a limited amount of budget information. I don't know whether we can actually do anything useful with that information, whether that's showing us what a line item costs actually matters in the analysis. That's meant to be a question of you all. Is that?
So the line item cost is a requirement from the state.
Okay. But since it's such a, overall, it's such a small part of the district budget, largest part of the budget is in salaries and things like this. But do you think we could look at that and say, we're investing the right amount of money in?
No, I think the LCAP is much more telling on that.
Okay.
So the SIPSAs require us to account for our federal funds. So you're only going to see your titles in here, which for most of our schools are smaller dollar amounts in comparison to the other funding that they receive. And then, so the SIPSAs have been around, well, actually they changed a little bit of the name, right? But the LCAP, like Bonnie stated, really goes into about 90% of our budget, including some of our titles attached to our actions and services. So this is, you know, kind of one of those plans that's a federal requirement that hasn't caught up with the LCAP and the LEA plan. And I think there may be a couple more plans they still are trying to condense.
Okay, so I'll put this into the category of required information for the state reporting, but whether it's useful to us, it's not clear. Here's the final thing to end on a really positive note. The board support slides that you all provided to us, I think were the best I've seen in 11 years because they're relatively specific. They're actually things that the board can work on. They're not just pleas for money, which I understand, but becomes very hard. And responding to what Alan Weiner said about may not happen unless it's written down is actually personally we'll go through and I'm going to abstract those that each one of the schools gave to us and put it, it'll become a one pager that I can carry around. I think it will help us. It should help us inform what we want as board presentations in the future. As well as budget stuff and guidance on how the board does its work. So kudos to you all for those, for the board support bullet items. Thank you. I think they're really great. I'll add one of my own that a couple of people spoke to, which was you mentioned multi-year support for initiatives. Well, at least 2 people mentioned that. And maybe it doesn't have to be a specific board item because I think we've been fairly good at saying, let's not evaluate things too quickly, that in most cases, we want to be looking at a multi-year trend for these things. So thank you all. That's it.
Thank you, Chris. Before calling on Alan, I'm just going to, before calling on Alan, I just want to do a 2-finger on this, as they say. And, you know, I was struck that on the budgeting, many of the items that were reported in these SIPSs were actually quite small dollar amount items. So, one of the questions that I had is like, geez, what's the most effective thing to spend money on? And I was looking at some of the larger ticket items where it looked like mainly we were spending money on either classroom reduction or it looked like counseling or other kind of staff kind of support seemed to be what the big ticket items are. But it's hard to evaluate that if we're only looking at this, this relatively small pot of money as opposed to the other things. So I just, I guess I'm echoing Chris's point that it's hard to it's hard to know what to make. It's an input about what we're spending the money on, but it's hard to evaluate it. Now, Trustee Sarver, do you have a go? Your hand is gone, but I assume you still would like to address the Zoom.
Yeah, I lowered my hand getting ready to go. But I think a little bit I want to follow in Trustee Thompson's footsteps. I don't have specific points I want to be making about one site or another or specific detailed follow-ups. To me, what's really, really interesting is the breadth of the presentation and what it means across the district. So let me address it by saying, I thought the presentation of School X was really, really detailed and fabulous. School Z had a couple of gaps in it that I think you should work on a little bit more. But aside from that, they were all pretty good. And I really do want to thank you for the preparation and the presentation here. I think there are two really interesting balances that become evident looking across the group of reports. The first is the balance that we're looking at between the data points that are selected and where we place our priorities, and the fact that I think priority selection across the district and at each of the sites shows that we are looking where there are issues and concerns, and we're putting our focus where it needs to be. And what that means is some of the raw numbers that are out there are shocking and disturbing. We had a lot of talk about, the A through G completions and things in the 50s and 60% ranges and things. And those aren't numbers that make us feel excited and proud, except when we look at it in terms of the incremental progress that has been going on. If we look at 40s and 50s% of our students not achieving that overall, it makes us feel very nervous. And then when we look at the gaps that are accompanying these numbers, we say, clearly, that's where our focus needs to be. And in report after report after report, that's where our focus is. And we see histories of incremental progress, that things are getting better, but they're getting better slowly, frustratingly slowly. There are big leaps in some years, in some categories, and there are surprising steps backwards in some years, in some categories. Our trend is moving forward. We are raising all boats, and we are closing the gap slowly as that happens, but we're looking at continuously, how do we accelerate that and how do we do more of it? And that's the essence of what's here. And maintaining that balance. We can't succeed by spending all of our time beating ourselves up about where the numbers are not as good as we want and why those are the priorities we're selecting. But we can't become complacent and spend our time patting ourselves on the back that we're making progress when we know we want to be making more. And to me, that boils down to the essence of the spirit of continuous improvement that has to be at the core of everything we do professionally in the district. And these reports are such a strong confirmation that that is exactly what's at our core all the time. We are looking at what work needs to be done. We're collaborating on what is going to have the biggest impact. And we are evaluating what the impacts have been and where we are succeeding, and we need to be doubling down on what we've been doing right and where we need to be doing dramatically more and keep looking for more. The other big balance that I look at here is the balance that I think dominates so much of what we do at the board and the district level, and it plays out in the life at the sites continuously, which is the balance between district-wide equity and consistency and the local control and the uniqueness of each community. And these reports reflected very much similar appreciations of what the district has been supporting. It's clear that the work on these reports moved back and forth a bit between sites, that there was a lot of collaborative work that the principals and the admin teams put into the district in laying out the format everybody was working from. A lot of the template came down already reflecting that collaborative spirit. And then a lot of work was added at one site or another that was then looked at a different site and incorporated in some ways. And a lot of the long-term initiatives have grown from one site or another and been adopted more broadly. And to me, it's really important that we continue to have that district-wide cross-site collaboration work that's going on, and that it is feeding that ability to bring to play our unique communities, the wisdom, the professionalism that each of our staffs bring to each site, and the unique needs, the unique inputs and supports that our students and our parent communities bring to each of the sites. And maintaining that balance continues to be really, really critical. And we see that fueling everything that's going on in these reports. And the things that the sites are driving at, sometimes the nomenclature is a little different. Sometimes the balance of emphasis is a little bit different, but they are very compatible, coherent needs and objectives that we're driving toward. And the more we can also share those unique homegrown solutions, I think a lot of the ongoing conversation that we have at district level meetings, at Wednesday collaborative work, and all the work that goes on needs to be looking at where are needs particularly demanding for a given site, and where are solutions particularly promising for a distinct site. And are there places where we need to match those up across sites to become even more effective. So I want to see that we get all of that collaborative support continuing. I did want to follow up with an apology. A couple of the little petty comments that I raised in reading through them. I always raise a few comments to everything. And I talked about places where some of the presentation materials, it was clear that a template or a chunk of the template had come from one site to another, and some of the site-specific terminology hadn't gotten cleaned up. That was a petty comment. And I think my intent is much more in what I've said earlier, that the collaborative work is really critical and really positive. And then I wanted to close with the comment that on the board in the meetings early this school year, we've raised several times, not enough, but we've raised it, appreciation for the tremendous work that our faculty and staff have done in reinventing education and launching the school year so effectively. I wanted to take the time now to talk about the admin teams who have done this work, who have done these presentations. All of you had your summer stolen from you by the pandemic, as so many all across the world have had. But you also gave your summers and the spring and the fall to the extraordinary effort of shepherding all this work through and bringing our staffs and our school sites to this point of readiness to serve our students in completely different ways this fall. And every one of you has given up incredible amounts of your personal time, your family time, your sanity time, your recharging time to make sure that our students were getting what they so deeply needed coming into this school year. And we can't pass these reports without recognizing how much of your extraordinary work it all derives from. And I just want to stop and make the big point of thanking you all for that. It has been tremendous and it is deeply appreciated.
Thank you, Trustee Nori, to be followed by Trustee Jack.
Oh, yeah, so I just like to firstly say I learned a lot from the presentations and reviewing the school plans that I didn't know about this district. So I was really grateful to see that info. If it's okay, I just had some specific questions for some of the schools about stuff that came up in the presentation. So I guess I'd start off with Sequoia. So I know you talked a lot about like encouraging more free and reduced lunch students to be in IB classes, and I've been reading up about IB classes in general, and I was just curious if you could talk more like if you have the numbers of free and reduced class students in IB classes right now, and what steps you think would work in increasing that number.
Oh, yeah. Okay, everybody, here we go. You ready? How much time do I get to talk about this? So we were part of a study that was funded. We were one of 5 schools in America that was selected to be a part of what they called a Bridging the Equity Gap in IB. And this took place, gosh, I want to say 2014 to 2017. We worked with a couple of consultants from IB, and then we worked with some other schools, which was really exciting. We developed an action plan with teachers, counselors. We had some students and parents weigh in. We did some focus group with students, and we looked at areas that we could leverage to really increase both like what is everyone's understanding of what IB is, what ways can we make IB more accessible for students, both in terms of the supports, but also in terms of just our messaging and our values and our commitments. And then what are the ways that we're going to measure how successful that we are? The big metric was the percentage of our free reduced lunch students that were enrolled in at least one or more IB classes by the time that they graduated. We did this work in conjunction with, gosh, now I'm spacing. There was another group that we were kind of working with simultaneously. The whole district was working with this group, and that was around gosh, does somebody jump in? What was the name of that group that
Equal Opportunity Schools.
EOS, Equal Opportunity Schools, yeah. And so they had a slightly different metric than the one that we did. There were a lot of conversations out of that work that we did. You can see a lot of really structural changes that are still in place. For example, we aligned vertically our English pathway, right? So 9th grade students now come in, and there is no IB track, non-IB track. Everybody's being prepped in the same way. We're standards aligned across those curriculum or across those classes, so that all students are getting the kinds of assessments they would get in an IB class. They're learning to think the way that they would need to in an IB class. We also have our counselors did a lot of outreach with our middle schools to try and dispel some of the myths around IB as some sort of an elitist program within Sequoia, and that actually Sequoia is an IB school. We did a ton of work school-wide just to raise awareness. Main piece that we had a common understanding. What are our objectives with IB? What are the IB learner profile characteristics that are most important? I'm going to stop there. There was a ton of work that went into this. There's more than that. That action plan that came out of that actually informs one of our main action items. So if you go and look at our WASC plan, you can see that action plan for IB, and it's still ongoing. It's one of the things, and we try. That's why we track IB participation in those other areas. It's not just its own thing. We think that that's a measure of student success, right? Because our vision is equity and access, equity and outcomes. The idea is it shouldn't matter what middle school you went to. It shouldn't matter how far along your parents got in terms of educational, or what your parents' income is, or what the color of your skin is. You come to Sequoia High School, you're going to have an opportunity to succeed in an IB class and be prepared to go to college. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you're successful.
All right, thank you. I guess I had another question. This one was for Tide, and I noticed that you talked about like recruitment. I was just curious, like, what are your goals for class sizes? And also, I saw like the gender gap, and I know you talked about it, especially seeing that like the gender gap's reflected in almost all parts of STEM. I was wondering like what plans you had to try to reduce that gender gap.
Thank you, Trustee Nori, and we are prepared for that question. I have a list. So please excuse me. Yeah, we're very aware, and actually the gap has gotten a bit wider. We did have some students transfer out of the area. We actually lost some students literally to the pandemic who have moved to Colorado, have moved out of state, who have moved to places that are more affordable, given the situation that we're in, and we've been tracking that profusely. We have done a lot of outreach. We've done a lot of partnership. We had very grandiose plans for late spring and for the summer. Some things that we had intended to do, we had an HTML 3-week Girls That Code camp that was supposed to take place over the summer, which of course, and again, a lot of this, I'm not going to keep overstating it, couldn't happen. We had a summer coding camp that was going to be one of our orientation camps. And one of the spearheads of that is a female student. We were recruiting from the middle schools as well, starting in 7th grade. So we wanted to do a 7th through what would be then our 10th grade coding camps. And part of this was not only just coding, but it was like activities, sports, workshops, entrepreneurship. Our entrepreneurship kicked off really strong in spring, and then of course we shut down. We had co-ed athletic teams, which was really cool because we're so small and we're not part of a league yet. And we actually had very strong female participation. We did a lot of work in our course selection and promotion for our CTE pathways, ensuring that there was a gender equity, both in our computer programming and our digital media marketing. We had a Relay for Life club run by primarily female students who started it. Lots of service clubs that were heavily run and trying to promote female participation as well as male. Like, we're not exclusive, but really an emphasis on recruiting students to come to Tide. Our dances, our game night was primarily led by our female students who also started several clubs last year. We had ongoing work with our families. We had family outreach nights. We did 8th grade information nights. I went out to all of the partner middle schools to present. And again, this was a new situation. So we're actually prepping very heavily right now for recruitment. I have a teacher with a release period. We've got promotional videos. We've got digital tours, digital shadowing or virtual shadowing, virtual tours. We're also looking actually to bring very small groups of people onto campus, literally one family at a time, to lead tours. We have a Girls That Code class that started, club, excuse me, that started last week, led by a teacher who took our Foothill dual enrolled class. She wasn't dual enrolled last summer, but she did sit the course. Female activities director, we've tried recruiting heavily female teachers and classified staff. So I don't know if that answers everything. We are extremely aware of the discrepancy. And I think that one of the pillars of Tide, right, is to change this dynamic in the workplace. We also had many plans in the spring to be going out and doing full school field trips, both to Exponent was one of them, getting into their makerspace, also to Facebook. We had a field trip plan there. We had a full day of a full school community service day plan. I mean, our spring was decimated, and as was everybody's, not just Tide. So I don't know if that completely answers everything, but we Tina and I met earlier, Ms. Smith and I met earlier in anticipation of that very question, as it is at the forefront of our minds, especially because Ms. Smith alone is a scientist. She was a biotech teacher, and this is something really important to both of us. And we value having women in the fields of science, math, especially as a STEM magnet school in our district. We want to make sure we bring in proportionate number of male to female students as we grow over the years. So do you have any further follow-up questions? And did I answer your question well?
Oh yeah, I was also just curious, like in general recruitment, what like are you aiming for like a class size to be?
We are aiming for a class size of 115 per class. So we are not where we are targeted to be. And that was why one of my board support requests is whatever support we can have. And we've received a ton from district office personnel throughout the year as we've been trying to recruit, get marketing materials and supplies. I think not having a facility up and running, and I think that was kind of a little bit of an Achilles heel for us as we started the year. And again, we got better and better throughout the year, but we're not established. And D-Tech went through the exact same situation. I met with their principal, Principal Montgomery, several times. I went out to D-Tech, went out to Summit, went out to Everest to really understand what it takes as a startup to get a school off the ground. So I wanted to really make sure I had a good understanding of what it looked like to get a school up and running from a grassroots perspective and from literally the ground up.
Thank you. I had one final question. That was for Redwood. So I couldn't help but noticing that like the suspension rate you originally talked about seemed to be pretty high, like around 20%. So I was wondering why it was so high and like what caused it to drop more recently.
Well, I think you probably have to ask the previous principal. When Bert and I came in, we came in together 2 years ago, and we just really focused on listening to kids' stories. And I think the principal was there, also did that, but did it in a different way. And we just really felt like we needed to empower kids and they needed to be there. Our attendance rates have historically been low. And if you're having kids go home because they're not doing what you want them to do, what are you doing to kids by not having them be there? So we went from 26.9 and we're now at 7.9. So that's right in range with what the district has. And so really it's just maybe doing things in a different way, but we're not very punitive. And sometimes when I would look at referrals, they looked a bit punitive to me, just because that's not what our kids need.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that was it. Thank you for the reports again. I did learn a lot from listening and reading them.
Thanks, Safik. Next on my list is Trustee Jack.
Great, thank you. So I appreciate all the work that goes into these reports. And I know that I was thinking about, it's always a joy to look back and think about the things you want to do and the things that you have done, right? Because I think that's like, as my knitting teacher used to say, sit back and admire your work. And so I think of these reports as a little bit of that, right? That ability to take stock and think about things. So I'm going to say that, you know, what I said to my children last night when I told them they had to watch that car crash, you know, these are historic times. And as much as it pains us, we have to be witness to it. And I have great confidence in this entire staff and in our district in navigating through these historic times and bringing our kids along. And so I feel like we're going to all get through this. That is going to happen. And for me, the report is, you know, a labor of a lot of work. I think there's good information. I mean, clearly it's a great educational tool. We've taught some people tonight about different things schools are doing. But the piece that I saw mentioned in the reports, and I heard Principal Crane sort of call it out a little bit, is the stuff that's actually going on right now that's not really in the reports. So, you know, we know we have 5150s happening. I know of one personally that I was texted about, and I'm sure Principal Crane appears to have some on his campus. And I think that those types of issues You know, the things that we are facing versus the plans that we made are really important. That kind of that gap analysis. We wanted to do these things, but these other things, to Allison's point, happened, right? We wanted to do all these things, but these things happened. I think it's really important, even though this is probably not the right document, because this is really a pro forma piece that's required. But I want to make sure that we capture those things, because I think it's important to be able to go back when this is all over, God knows when that's going to be, and reflect on what did we do in terms of those types of things. I think the mental health piece is huge. I mean, when I'm hearing about kids, you know, getting sent off to the psych hospital, that's a problem. And I don't think we can solve that problem necessarily, but I think it's really important that we dig in with those families to figure out what's going on. What are those signs? What should we be doing differently? That's just, now that we know what's happening, I just feel like it's an opportunity to do some fixing that we need to do. So there's that piece. I was very glad to hear everybody, I think, pretty much for the most part, mention the 2 initiatives that are really so critical that we continue forward with. And I'm really happy to hear that commitment to those initiatives and that you believe that those are taking effect, those are working for students. Because to Sean's point, and I know some other people said this as well, you know, if we could just get rid of levels, we could start to address institutional racism, right? That's kind of the big thing. And I realize that's the third rail, and I'm saying something that's completely crazy, but I actually believe it. So I think that's an important piece. And so I'm glad to see that we're taking those things seriously and moving forward on them. But also I was super happy to hear what Stephanie had to say about the CTE pathways. I am so glad that you're working with the trades. I'm so glad to hear that we're bringing those hospitality programs in so strongly, because we will get through this, and there are going to be so many jobs out there, and we need our kids getting those good, well-paying union jobs to help them stay in this area. I think that's so critical. To me, that's as important as an IB program, and it's as important as our graduation rates, and it's as important as our college-bound percentages, because we have to make sure that we are offering every opportunity to kids after high school. That's just critical. So I was glad to see some of that was happening in the reports. And finally, I think I did see, and it was sprinkled through, and it's really hard because you guys are operating on the school site level, as you should. And we're trying to look at it from the district level with an sort of that aggregate perspective. And so what I saw in there was, you know, how many hotspots and how many Chromebooks. And I know we've had some updates on that, but it's all about that connectivity issue. I am very worried that we've got kids, and I couldn't take the time today to run through and add up the numbers, but Diane, you know I would, is how many kids are sitting out there at the end of the first quarter struggling to be connected. And we know we're going to have a lot of learning loss between the spring and this quarter. And what I did not see in there, but I know you're all thinking about it, is how are we going to close that gap for those kids? And I didn't feel like I saw that in here. I know it's probably not going to be in here because we know what this report is for, but I really hope that we're going to document what we do for that, and that we're thinking hard about how are we going to solve that problem, because that is, you know, to me, that's the thing that keeps me up at night. And I think it's the existential threat for this group of students and their future. And I just don't think we can operate quickly enough to get those kids back to a place where they can get online to access their education, ideally with some people too. I think they really need some people. But anyways, those are sort of my quick thoughts, my shout outs to everybody for the great work that you're doing. I know everybody's working very hard, and I know that Bonnie's going to report back on all of these topics soon, right? Because some of them are really pressing, immediate, urgent concerns. And so I really do want to make sure that we keep our finger on the pulse of those things.
I will include in my Cabinet Friday update what I think all of those things are so that you can let me know if I'm missing anything to report back on.
Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. Connectivity, the number of students not getting connected, the attendance issues, how many kids have we potentially lost in terms of mental health? I think that's really important that we are aware of that number. Yeah, I think that kind of summarizes everything. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your good work.
Georgia, I'm not sure about how I'm going to get you the connectivity or the mental health numbers, but I'll talk with you about that offline and who else at the district might be able to help us.
I think that's all in attendance.
And can I just, Georgia, I'd like to say one thing about the emotional well-being of students. And, you know, it's a partnership with parents. And so I was working with our PTSA president today, Michelle Kelly, on what we can do to bring parent workshops and parent support groups to our community. And so she's working on a plan to have a parent support group sponsored by PTSA, so parents can have a forum to talk to each other, to talk to somebody, a professional, to talk to somebody about how they can support their own kids through this as well. And we can say it, but so I'm looking forward to seeing what that'll look like with Michelle Kelly and that support group for parents. So that's going to be the key factor in this, is our partnership with parents, because when they're on our site, we have the experts to help the students. The parents are not the experts. The students are the ones that are pushing their parents away, and this makes it even more difficult during this time when the teenagers are pushing their own parents away, and that's the only adult that they have access to. So I'm looking forward to that, and so you'll hear more about that hopefully.
Georgia, I'd like to add one more thing as well, which is I think our number of kids working to support themselves and their families right now has tripled. So I think that it's an outstanding, in a not positive way, number. And that I think that that needs to also maybe calculated or looked at. It's amazing how many kids need to go and get.
Yeah.
It's super important.
I actually agree with you on that, Stephanie. And I'd asked Bonnie about that issue, particularly at the last board meeting, because I've heard about that. And I agree that that is another group of kids that we need to be paying attention to.
Okay, I had myself next on the list, and I would just echo the appreciation that my colleagues have expressed for these reports, more importantly for the work that underlies, that makes these reports possible. I had, I would say, 2 questions and an observation, and I think I'm saying things that others have already talked about, but number one, with respect to this issue of attendance/engagement, and this is a genuine question, and so perhaps principals are able to jump in and provide an answer. You know, I read these very detailed intervention plans that existed in each of these reports, and what was not clear to me is how much this was standardized, how much we were doing. Your experience would be the same if you were a student at Carlmont or MA or Sequoia. If you say, I mean, I heard a story, I'm sure, about a parent who was meeting with somebody from our district who was terribly upset because their student, notwithstanding the tiered intervention programs at their site, had 30 zeros and was basically disappearing from school, right? And so would the experience of that family or that student, the response, be the same at Carlmont and MA and Sequoia, or do we have ad hoc, or ad hoc is judgmental, do we have unique or particularized or bespoke arrangements at different sites to deal with this issue of engagement and attendance? I don't know, I've heard you talk a lot, Simone, about efforts at MA. So maybe I'm wondering, you know, Woodside, Diane, Ralph, at Carlmont, are you doing something the same, something different? Are you guys coordinating about this in Principals Council, about best practices? Again,
yes,
standard.
Yes, at the Principals Councils with IVPs on Tuesday morning, we looked at the list and shared how we were all reaching out. So I think the student or family interface with the schools would be very similar. The person or the title who might be reaching out as a first rung might be different, depending on what category, and if that student has a case manager, are they a 9th grader on SAP? Are they already receiving teletherapy, and is the mental support coordinator is it the intervention counselor, or is it their grade level counselor? So each school might cut up their list a little bit different and give the first run to somebody different or a different title on campus, but we're all pulling the same data, and then with the expectation that we're following up on it.
Okay, so then my second question, and George has already adverted to it, and it concerns mental health. And again, this is about life that we live rather than life that we planned for. But we read, of course, the data about the very, very heavy incidence of depression and anxiety, severe mental health hardship being faced by young people above all. And so I don't know, this time I'll call on Stephanie and Simone. Like, are you seeing it? What's your experience? And I think, you know, as Georgia suggests, this is something that we might want to, in a more systematic way, kind of try to gain an understanding of as a board.
I could throw one thing out that it's actually really helping a lot of my kids who have the anxiety to come to school. So I don't want to take away from that. Some of our kids who were having such a struggle with social anxieties have been just kicking it, like doing really well. And so whatever's happening for them is good for them, right? Like it's in a good, positive way. And then I don't feel truthfully that we've had a lot more mental health situations than we normally do, because we have quite a high number of mental health. We've had some severe mental health issues. We're finding more psychoses happening, bigger numbers, but they were started last year. So we don't know when they actually happened. So the numbers are not so much different for us because that's our general population in some ways.
Right. Simone, what are you seeing?
So actually, I just messaged to our entire student body on Friday how, thinking of you. And because this is a time of year where we do see this kind of honeymoon and either kids not engaging, connecting for one reason or another. And we are offering support groups for students. Let's talk strategies, and students can sign up for the different supports they need. And if you notice the support I asked for, we need more mental health supports, even virtually. We do work with Star Vista, who've been fabulous, and our wonderful mental health support specialist, Shonda, they're really shepherding these places. But what was really also interesting in disaggregating the different interventions, so to your first question too, some of that's been home visits. A lot of that has been assigning a group of students to paraprofessionals to call consistently, and campus aides. And I think all the sites have shared those consistent practices, right? To call students, to check on them. I heard a call come in the office today from a parent. One of our campus aides has reached out, right? So it's that case management that's really, really, really important. And then also the collaboration with counselors. One thing, though, I noticed when we looked at that list of students is there are students excused with health reasons, right? So like the parent has called in to excuse with health, which is really an interesting, and our counselors are typically aware of what that student's situation is. So you might think we're just seeing that kids aren't engaging or they're unexcused absences, but there actually are legitimate health excused absences, more so than I thought there would be. Now, I don't know if it's mental health, I'm assuming, because maybe for some students, it's just really hard. There's not that face-to-face social interaction. And, I think we have Emily here, my vice principal, who could probably speak to the 5150s a little bit more. But there's definitely mental health, whether it's a 5150 to that degree, or whether it's, I'm struggling with more isolation and then on the flip side, we have a student who said, I love this distance learning. My friends aren't distracting me and my grades have improved so much. And then we're also looking at students who last year were doing well, and now in these first 7 weeks have just tanked, right? Because then what do we need to do to try and get them to where they were? So I don't know if I answered it, but I think
that's very helpful. Amika, on this?
I was just going to ask for your help as a board in a very concrete, simple thing that you probably can do. And I feel like, Carrie, you probably know the right people. At the county level, they are not doing home visits. When you do a call for a 5150 is different. I can say that because we've had a few already. But for anytime we're doing calls to protective services to CPS, they're not doing home visits. Now, our on-site manager of social services has done more home visits in the last several months than he has done in the previous 2 years of working at East Palo Alto Academy. So I don't know what you can do to pressure them. I don't know. We are essential workers. Maybe they're not. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but it is asinine to me to think that we are worried about a child's well-being. And sorry, there's not a federal offense that's going on. They'll figure it out, is what it feels like they are telling us. And there are legitimate concerns, and we're doing the best that we can. But my goodness, if there's a time we need to lean on our county officials, it is right now.
I mean, maybe that's the kind of thing that we can put in through Nancy to try to leverage the resources of a bunch of school districts.
And Amaka, just to clarify, Amaka, you're talking about county mental health, not the county office of ed. You're talking about right. That has been we've talked about that. That's been the services there have been, I think, thinning out prior to COVID. The supports for student mental health coming from county have I mean, we've felt it huge at Sequoia. I mean, we lost a person, position was eliminated. The support for any kind of visits for attendance or well-being virtually non-existent. So definitely feeling that as well. I can second what Amaka said 100%. Just one other thing on this. So we have set up at Sequoia what we call communications groups. We've had about 60 staff members volunteer to take on a caseload of between 8 and 10 students. And they're basically like, I'm going to try and shepherd this kid and this family really through this period of time that we're doing distance learning. We set up a series of protocols, kind of a weekly or bi-weekly check-in depending on the needs of the students. I was talking with my assistant, Susie Bass, who has taken on a group, and she was just telling me how frustrated it was to have spent, like how difficult it is in some cases to track down a family, a kid who's not attending, and then get someone on the phone and mom's like, yeah, he's just not interested. He's not gonna do school. He really hasn't been doing it since he was probably in like 6th grade, and he sits here with me. We watch TV, and so there's a lot of different cases like that involve all kinds of different issues and factors. We've been able to identify through the proactive mental health support groups that we had in place last year, the kids who we think probably are missing that part of their life. We're super eager through our AmeriCorps interns, our Teen Resource Center staff to get some of those kids on campus in small groups. I love that we're starting to problem solve around that as well. We know that's really important because in addition to the kids who are in crisis, there's a lot of work we do to prevent kids from getting in crisis at all of our schools. I know that's to be the case, and that's the work I'm also as worried about it. In addition to just helping identify where kids are in crisis and what we need to do to help out to not let go of the positive energy that we've built around preventing crisis with the groups of kids that we've been working with.
Thanks. And then the last thing I have on these reports is really just an observation about a research agenda in a way, or that's the way that I think about it. But there were a number of themes that emerged in these different reports around two issues that struck me as particularly interesting. One of them has already been talked about, detracking, right? Which is being done in different ways, in different subject areas, to different degrees at different schools. And then grading, whether it's standards-based grading, which I saw some interesting references to at Tide, and I hear Carl say, how do you do authentic assessment during distance learning? Actually, my question I suppose would be, how can you do anything other than authentic assessment during distance learning? Because the old assessments that we used to use are too easy to cheat on, right? So you have to do authentic assessments if you even want to try to assess. But these ideas about grading, I think I see a real flowering of different approaches. And I don't have that much time left to serve on the board, but I'm hoping that these issues, detracking and grading reform, remain issues that stay on the agenda and that are, if not driven by the board in a top-down way, or at least cultivated and fostered and encouraged, because I think those are huge initiatives. I have next on the list Carrie Dubois, and then I have a hand up from Tony DeCecco in the attendee room. So I'll unmute her after Carrie.
I don't know if you've noticed, I've been putting my hand up and down and up and down. I didn't know whether I was going to say anything because so much has already been discussed. Thank you, Amika, for that last comment, which generated some great discussion. I want to say that, again, I've said this before, it would help if our district had a SARB. And some of you know I'm sitting on the state SARB right now where I get to hear best practices from around the state. If we had a SARB, that would help when a parent says, I'm not going to do anything, you know, my kid's not attending school, and it's in a restorative way. I mean, the models that I've been looking at, it would help the sites with these kids who are not attending. It would help the sites if they're kids where the county needs to get involved in a CPS check. So SARBs, after the last day of listening to 8 hours of SAR presentations, that would be an added benefit to our district. It would help you guys. So I will keep talking to my colleagues and talking to people. I think that's something we have to have. As a solution. And I'd be happy to share some of the best practices that I've been listening to, which really are completely inspirational. I really appreciated Trustee Nori's questions. That's one of the reasons I put my hand back down. Your questions were great. The only reflection I have and what I've wondered about, well, I got two things. First of all, it's a lot to do 7 schools in one night. And I'm wondering if we should break them up a bit. It's just a lot. It's a lot to read. It's a lot to process, at least for me. My only reflection is, again, we brag a lot about our attendance. I'm glad attendance and engagement has been coming up as a theme tonight, because I think there are issues that we have there as a district. We also brag a lot about our district initiatives. And one of the things I've been wondering, do we really ever circle back in an authentic, powerful way with our students to make sure we're really working on the right things? And I ask this because when I'm out in the community, I don't get people really saying, oh, I'm so excited about what you're working on, right? And that includes groups that are advocating for our most at-risk kids. So I hear just more concerns that we should be doing some other things, like possibly having a SARB. So I was also thinking, again, with our so many years, this focus on A through G completion, when what I know is so many of our kids who are very at risk don't really benefit from that, right? And I'm even thinking of a kid in my community, I brought him up before. It's a kid that has struggled with school since kindergarten. He does not like school. And again, that A through G focus has not helped him. So can we do more to just sort of double check, kind of like a 360, to make sure that to really understand how kids feel about our initiatives? Or do you guys think we're already doing that?
I can speak to that.
Go ahead, Simone.
I can say that one of the things we've been able to is our counselors have developed a 4-year plan where they guide students through those conversations, right? But it's also that fine line between making sure we're not going to exclude anybody from the opportunity to be A through G eligible, but to understand what their goals are. And I think that's where a goal in development of strong CTE pathways, which we're working on, they're not mutually exclusive of each other, right? And so that students really engage with a passion they also have, but also because I think a lot of times students get the message they're not worthy of A through G eligibility, or they don't see themselves as going to college. So it involves a discussion. What are you interested in? What do you see yourself doing? Okay, how do we get you there? Right? But we still don't want to discourage a student from pursuing the courses that make them college eligible. But I completely hear your point that there are some students who are going to want to opt to do something more along the vocational lines. But I think that's where at least CTE has really progressed in that it covers both. And so I think if we could really focus on getting more students to complete the pathways, right, and go through that progression, then they can figure out what they want to do, but they're also not excluded from the opportunity to be A through G eligible.
But you think that does that feedback that you're gathering, does that really come back to the board and the district? Feedback directly from kids, kind of related to our district initiatives. Are we really doing that at all, do you think?
I think we missed a piece there because I think there's a difference between college and A through G college and trades. Because a lot of our kids open their eyes and realize they can go to community college when they never had anybody go to community college before. We have a very high rate of parents that have not attended college. So I don't want to forget that middle piece because we have random A through G. It's not required of a continuation school to be A through G. And we have kids very, very successful in community colleges. So I just don't want to say that's either or, because it's super important to really focus on those kids getting that first step into community college. So, and we talk about it all the time. I mean, we have college classes, everything, you know, because our kids are often the ones that don't think they can, and they can, and they're successful.
Okay, so if there's nothing further on this, it looks like Tony's put her hand down on this issue. So is there anything further on this issue? If not, I would go ahead and say let's roll on to item 10, which is an action item, which is approval of these school plans, which we've just discussed at some length. Is that correct, Ms. Hanson, that we are now asked to take formal action on the plans that have been presented to us?
That is correct.
Well, I believe that we should have exhausted the conversation, but I'm happy to open the floor if there are other comments or concerns. If not, I would invite a single motion to approve all of the 7 single site plans for student achievement plans that have been presented to us. Is there such a motion? Maybe said a little bit more articulately than I just muttered.
I move approval.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. So we've been at it the board has been at it for 4 hours. Yay, good job, everybody. Okay, so the board has been at it for, well, let's just, the board's been at it for 4 hours. So I would propose that we take a very short break. Come back in let's say 10 to 6 minutes, come back at 8:10, and we can finish up the remaining items on our agenda at that point. And I think if you're not the principal, I don't even know if anybody's actually assigned to be here tonight from one of the sites, but I think you could probably, I think your work is done, unless you're Amika, Guillaume, in which case your work is not done. But we'll try to finish it up pretty quickly after the break. So let's take a break. See you in about 6 minutes. Okay, welcome back. It appears that we are all reassembled. We did a good job taking our break. Yay, board. Okay. And so we come now to our next action item, which is item 10.2, which involves approval of East Palo Alto Academy's learning continuity and attendance plan. Now, this should also, I think, be largely pro forma, since at our last board meeting, we had both a hearing on this issue and then considered it as a discussion item. But Ms. Guillaume or Ms. Hanson, are there new insights that we should be aware of, or things that we should be considering in deciding whether to approve this plan? Bonnie's saying no. Amika maybe has left the building. So I would invite a motion to approve the East Palo Alto Academy Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan.
I'm happy to make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Okay. So then that brings us to item 10.3, which we had on our agenda last time, but it was pulled because I think some additional work was done on it. And that is the approval of the amended management confidential and unrepresented employee health and welfare benefit cost arrangement. And so we've all had a chance to look at the background on this. Ms. McAvoy, Dr. McAvoy, is there anything we should know? Do you want to share to us or stipulate what the adjustments were, or anything else that we should know about?
Yes, what we did was, this is a revision and a recommendation of the amendment that you actually approved last year. And the revision to this amendment takes into consideration the fact that the actual premiums for CalPERS have changed. And so rather than a 50% differential, the differential is now that the district will be paying 63% of the difference between the Kaiser cap rate and then the other CalPERS plan that the employee is selected. The other change to this amendment was that we put into place the fact that we would pay that difference for any of the plans that someone was on before the cap went into place. And so those are the two changes to the amendment. So it's a 63% differential rather than the 50% differential.
Okay, and I should also note, for the record, all members of the board received or were sent, appear to be addressees on a letter that was sent today, signed by confidential staff members, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 confidential staff members, basically urging that the districts reinstate medical benefits to the premium cap of the highest HMO. At this point, want to see whether there are any comments. So I'm looking at our attendees. And so what I'm going to do now is to unmute Tony Crapo. So you should be, if you unmute yourself, Tony, you should be good to go.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I hear you well.
Okay. Good evening, Board of Trustees. My name is Tony Crapo. I'm the Director of Purchasing and Support Services. Over the past year, I've learned way more than I ever wanted to know about health benefits through my participation on the Joint Benefits Committee. Since my role in the committee has been highly visible, many employees have reached out to me with benefits questions and concerns. In recent weeks and months, I've become sort of a sounding board for employees to share their many frustrations regarding the current state of our benefits. One of the recurring themes from our unrepresented employees is the fear of retaliation for speaking out at board meetings with opposing viewpoints. Since this fear exists, warranted or not, I've let them know that I'd be willing to collect and share some of their concerns as well as my own at this meeting. What I'll be reading is a compilation of some of those concerns. With that in mind, I'd like to request that the board allow me to continue speaking beyond the allotted 3-minute time limit if that's possible.
Do you have a sense of how many minutes it is, Tony? If it's 40 minutes, if it's 40 minutes, I think the answer might be no.
I'd request instead of 3, 4.5.
That's fine.
Okay. First bullet point. It's wrong that the board would even consider allowing this Kaiser cap to continue for the management confidential group in the middle of a pandemic. If board members really believe that we should all leave CalPERS at the same time and that there should be no losers, then the Kaiser cap should be rescinded so that all staff are treated fairly. The discussions initiated by trustees regarding the possible exit from CalPERS seem to primarily focus on the effect to retirees rather than the effect to current employees. There's a perception that some board members have placed a higher priority on retiree endorsements of them during an election year rather than on the current employees who are actually experiencing the district-imposed financial burden. Although we were told that the cap placed on management confidential employees was an effort to save the district money, it's clear that it was a failed attempt by the superintendent to get the bargaining groups to agree to the same cap. There is no way that the STTA would ever agree to the Kaiser cap since almost half, 47% of all certificated staff have a Palo Alto Medical Foundation accessible plan. That is not something that they would ever give up. In a prior board meeting, Chris Thompson made a comment regarding the lack of response to the unrepresented medical benefits survey. He made it seem as if lack of responses possibly equated to the unrepresented group not caring about the outcome. To be clear, when our group was initially brought together and notified that the cap was going to affect, we were told in no uncertain terms that we were not allowed to vote and that we would have no say in our benefits. If we didn't have a say in our benefits then, why would we ever think that our opinions somehow mattered now in a survey? I supported the CalPERS exit. It provided a viable alternative that allowed employees to access Palo Alto Medical Foundation at a lower cost and in some cases no cost, and could have resolved the Kaiser cap issue. To the extent that the superintendent played a role in the decision regarding whether or not to exit CalPERS, the decision not to leave feels like a retaliatory attack against this employee group for our role in the vote of no confidence signed earlier this year. Anyone who has attended a recent board meeting knows that there's been a shift towards a focus on equity. It's hard to reconcile this focus on equity when, as an employee, I'm not viewed through a lens of equity. In the past 7 months, I've worked more 12-plus-hour days than at any other time in my career. I've gone days without eating lunch just because I didn't have time to. A colleague told me before this meeting that he doesn't have time to use the restroom anymore because he's going back to back Zoom meetings. I've been given a steady stream of additional responsibilities that I just don't have the bandwidth or staff to handle. I've been contacted by the former superintendent minutes before midnight and asked to prepare and present slides for an 8 a.m. presentation that I had no prior knowledge of. While the world was sheltering in place, I was labeled an essential worker and kept showing up to work in a near empty building each and every day. While on vacation, I responded to every text and email that said, I know you're on vacation, but ... We've all given so much of ourselves to the district during this unprecedented time of need, all the time ignoring the higher levels of stress, anxiety, confusion, and sheer gravity of the responsibility that was being thrown at us while our leadership was failing. Not only was our physical health put at greater risk, but there was a huge toll placed on our mental and emotional well-being. What we need the lens of equity to see is that the board has singled out this very group of people and stripped away their affordable access to doctors that they've entrusted their lives to for years. We need you to see that currently 832, which is 93% of the employees in this district, have access to a Palo Alto Medical Foundation accessible healthcare plan with 0 out-of-pocket contributions. But only 17 of them, 1.9%, are currently paying out of pocket to access those exact same doctors. That's not equity. We have newly hired unrepresented employees that were told they'd be eligible for 50% of the differential between Kaiser and the next highest plan. But according to the item being brought forward tonight, they're explicitly not eligible because they were hired after July 1st, 2019, and instead are required to pay 100% of the difference between plans. As a reminder, for a family, 100% of the difference between Kaiser Family and ABC Traditional is $15,419 annually out of pocket. Even our lowest paid, newly hired, full-time employees are entitled to access that exact same plan with zero out-of-pocket cost. That's not equity. In closing, I believe it's unconscionable that board members would allow something so unjust to even be possible without speaking out and taking a stand against it. I respectfully request the board consider rescinding the cap on unrepresented employee benefits so that they are brought up to the same level as all other employees in the district. Thank you.
Tony, does that conclude your remarks?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Now, with respect to one issue, the ABC, I thought that is the issue that's being addressed here in part, isn't it? The fact that we're now providing a cost share with respect to the difference between Kaiser and any plan, right?
Yes, and then also, Dr. McAvoy, you want to talk to the others about the hiring within the organization?
So it is true that anyone who is new to the district after July 1 does not benefit from the amendment and from the differential. And anyone who is hired previous to that date in the district, and that would include, and we modified the language slightly to also include people that had moved from, for example, a teaching position into an administrative position. They are now covered by the differential. But when we hired people in, we made it was very, very clear in the information that was provided to them that they would be paying the full amount. And that does apply to, I want to say, at least one or two. I'd have to go back and actually look.
Okay, Ms. Salvatore, the floor is yours.
As I stated previously, I agree with many of the points that Mr. Crapo brought up from confidential and management employees. The district, in bargaining with the SDTA, has often brought the concept of a cap of some sort, or lowering, shall I say, the cap that we currently have on benefits. And in every year, we have represented our members' desire to prioritize benefits over increase in salary. We understand that it is, in many cases, a zero-sum game. We make that decision. We take, in many cases, less salary increase than our neighboring districts in order to maintain the benefits package that we have, that our members have come to trust. The unrepresented employees are just that. They are unrepresented. They did not have the opportunity to take that decision. It was taken away from them. The superintendent at the time chose to make them an example and asked management employees to show leadership. And those words were used in the board meeting when this decision was originally taken, that managers were showing leadership, putting our money where our mouth is if we're going to ask the other bargaining units to do the same. But what they did is they brought much less compensated confidential employees along for that ride. Those confidential employees did not have the opportunity to say, I'm not actually a management person. This isn't my battle. I'll wait to move with the rest of the district. Newly hired administrators did not have the ability to say to the superintendent, no, actually, one of the reasons I came to this district might have been for this benefits package, and I would rather that we move as a district together through the benefits committee to look at options. What happened was really the superintendent trying to strong arm us into a situation where the bargaining units would consider exiting CalPERS in order to spare our colleagues
whom we work with and whom we care about the expense or the choice of having to give up their doctor or give up their home. For SDTA, it's been very difficult to sit in the benefits committee meetings as a full participant, knowing that really the instigation for it was a maneuver where our valued employees were used as pawns. We have every intention of participating in the benefits committee. We have no vested interest in staying in CalPERS. If we can guarantee our members the same coverage and find a savings for the district that will allow us to have compensation that is similar to neighboring districts or exceeds it, or enables us to provide more services to our students and new programs that we want to with that money, we would be more than happy to do it. We went through that process. We are being good faith partners, but you have, as a board, asked management and confidential employees to stick their necks out. 2 meetings ago, or at the last time this was discussed, Trustee Jack said no person should have to give up their doctor, and she talked about her eye doctor that she loved, I believe it was. Well, that's exactly what you asked and in fact forced every confidential employee who was not on Kaiser to do. They can't make up the difference between the two costs on their salary. So I would stand with what Mr. Crapo said and the confidential employees and the management employees who are still here to say this was an unwise decision. It was something that we could have worked together collaboratively toward, and I hope that we still can. But in terms of the incredibly hard work everyone is doing, I think that the cap should be restored as it's been asked for.
I see next Ms. Kennel.
Yes, thank you. So I have come to speak on this before. I really want to speak on the behalf of the confidential employees to the points you just heard outlined by Tony and Edith. We got this backwards. This was not a lead by example. I'm sorry. This was not, let us take the lead and then we can bargain that with ASME and SDTA. I think there is a commitment. It sounds like for us to exit CalPERS together and save the district way more money than you're saving by not restoring the benefits if you go with a PAMP plan. CalPERS is now $3,400 for a family for a Palo Alto medical plan. That is highway robbery. That is ridiculous. There's a huge increase. Hence, I know the increase in covering the difference. But for our confidential employees, that is a huge chunk. And so please, if anything, just know this was not lead by example. It was the reverse of what you would want to see as lead by example, or, you know, we need to set the tone. So please, please, if anything, reconsider with our confidential employees in mind, mostly. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Dubois.
I do want to stand with the unrepresented employees. I think it was a mistake. I didn't feel good when this decision was made. And I didn't speak out about it at the time, but it never felt right to me. And I feel it is an equity issue. So what can we do as a board? How can we revisit this? Do I just vote no tonight, or can we have another conversation? It was a mistake, in my opinion. I don't think we had enough input before we went this route.
Well, I'm not sure that voting no, I mean, I'm not sure that voting no on the proposal works, because the proposal, I think, is actually to provide a subsidy, right, for employees to kind of offset part of the difference. So I think if you vote no, then you're leaving them with 100% of the cost. So I think what we're doing is we're talking about that. We've talked about this a bunch. So I don't know if the board is reconsidering its views. I mean, Chris, you're next. Trustee Thompson.
So I'd like to address two things. The comments I made about the survey and the lack of responses, I wanted to comment on that before a general comment. And that is the intent. My intent there in observing that we didn't get a very good response was to try and get more. That said, I want to be sensitive to the comments, people who worried about or felt they weren't being heard. It's my hope that all staff throughout the different district know that the board wants to hear from them and would never consider any sort of retaliatory action based upon comments. I've never seen that happen in my years with the board. Do not expect it would happen at all. All of that said, I'm grateful to Tony Crapo, who became an outlet, like an ombudsperson for this, and it gave us a chance to hear from the individuals who were comfortable presenting to the board. The larger point is this. I agree with what Mr. President Weiner said about this was intended to be a correction, a helpful remark. I do believe this was a problem of our own making and not just the former superintendent, but the board that voted on this and encouraged the action. I would like to see whether the subcommittee could, I would support a vote in favor of this to take immediate action to reduce the premiums, but also go back to work with Jackie and the subcommittee to see how we may be able to address the concerns of those employees.
Other comments on this? For Jackie, I have it here. How many are in the confidential as opposed to the management group?
I don't know the exact numbers. Confidentials, I think it's between 7 and 10. I'd have to go back and look because of the definition. I think what complicates the matter, and we can definitely, we have a window because benefits start January 1st. So we do have a window in which we can change course if the board wishes to do that. One of the complicating factors is that there was an assignment of a 2% raise when the cap went into place that that ASME and SDTA did not realize. So, it's a little more complicated than simply reinstating the cap. So we have to figure out what that would look like and come back to the board with some options on how to address that. But we do have a window because benefits kick in January 1st. But open enrollment is occurring as we speak.
Trustee Jack. Trustee Jack's chair. I give the floor to Trustee Jack's chair. Okay. So Trustee Sarver.
I just want to, throw my voice in with the concerns that are being spoken to here. That this was an action that was taken not unilaterally by the superintendent, but by the governance team working together toward, as Ms. Salvatore has said, addressing the overall zero-sum game of an attempt to stop flushing large amounts of unwanted revenue down the drain of unnecessarily overpriced healthcare, to turn that into greater compensation for our staff. And we ended up being clearly surprised by unintended consequences. And I think the conversation that we've had so far, Trustee Thompson talking about the item that is on the plate right now is increasing the mitigation that we have thrown at the unintended consequences, which is still a positive immediate step to take. And then actually asking to look into what would be involved in unwinding and being able to move forward with the change out of CalPERS to lower the overall cost. And what remains beneath all of that, the long-standing conversation about total compensation is that we need to all be partners together in making the choices that reduce the overall costs so that there is greater overall funding available for compensation. And what we have been after is employee participation in the financial consequences of choosing the substantially more expensive options that don't provide substantially better coverage. What they do provide uniquely is a continuation of familiar coverage with familiar doctors and plans. So we need to recognize and work through all of that, but continuing to pursue towards some sort of a sharing arrangement where we are partners in making the long-term choices that are overall less expensive health care for all participants is the only way to turn that into more funding available for compensation. But I think we want to work to unwind the unintended consequences that we have gone into, and I think on this evening's agenda item, we want to go ahead and approve it so that we increase the mitigation available while we are still pursuing an unwinding. And I want to second the thing that it is not appropriate to attempt to simply throw the former superintendent under the bus as the unilateral agent of this having come into play.
Trustee Jack.
Yeah, sorry, my computer was running out of power.
We heard from your chair while you were away. So
I know, sorry. Anyways, so I just want to say that I believe the work that the Benefits Committee is doing and has been trying to do, and I believe Tony is on the committee with the committee, is attempting to reach that promised land where everybody can get the thing they want. And so I don't think there was necessarily a focus on the retirees. That was brought up again by kind of the same people who are bringing up this issue. So we wanted to understand that issue better. We do, thanks to you. I really appreciate it actually, because it was a very deep dive into a very specific area, but at the same time, we're always keeping our eye on how are we ensuring that we are providing the choices of healthcare that people have been used to. So it's not that we're favoring any one group. We're trying to provide everything that we believe we've heard from people that they want. I agree with Tony that I feel that I have learned more about health insurance in this particular environment than I have ever done before. And actually that I've learned a lot about health insurance in the past, but there's just a lot of levers, basically. You do one thing, a different thing happens, and we're trying to hopefully do some strong work that will help us all move to a different place to realize those financial benefits that can then be used internally. So that's been a lot of the work that we've been going through. I hope that all made sense. It's really dense. It's a lot of dense numbers and really dense information in trying to think through all of the different options and components. So that's what we've been trying to do. I believe we're going to get there. I believe it's not an easy road. So I appreciate everybody's patience as we work through this. And I believe we actually had a benefits committee meeting to be scheduled, or was scheduled. So I know that something is on the calendar for this further discussion. So I also want to echo the thoughts of my other board members that I do not believe that this is the superintendent, former superintendent, being thrown under the bus, that the board, and I appreciate that my colleagues are taking responsibility for being a partner in the original decision. That is what happened, and I appreciate that.
Okay, so I think I'm next in the queue. Yes, this was a leadership team decision. This was not the superintendent on her own. I know it was unpopular with the people it affected. I was one of the people who was involved in that decision. I own that and accept responsibility for it. Number two, I would say, I just want to echo Chris's concern or comments. I mean, I understand that it can be difficult to raise concerns, but I don't believe this board or this, well, I certainly know this board, would not engage in reprisals against anybody for criticizing or commenting. I may disagree with you, right? I may tell you at a board meeting, like, yeah, I understand your position, I disagree with it, or I might even say things that are sharper than that in characterizing, my disagreement with your position, but it's not going to cost anybody your job. Now, here's what I think in terms of the substantive issue. The district has a strong interest in not paying 100% of whatever the expense of healthcare might be. This is a priority of this district and has been for a long time in trying to impose controls or limits on the cost of healthcare. And one of the ways of doing that is burden sharing, right? Virtually every employer does something like this. So I think that can be expected to be a position, whether or not it's where we come out at the end of all of these processes, but that will be an interest of management, right? Of seeking burden sharing as a way of helping to reduce or control insurance costs. Number two, now that's unpopular, because as between an arrangement in which 100% of my health insurance is paid for by my employer and one in which I have to contribute, the latter one is less desirable. I understand that. But I think there is an abiding interest on the part of the district in favor of some kind of mechanism to control costs. Number two, the differential treatment of different categories of employees, it's not perfect, but it's also a fairly common arrangement in many different kinds of employers, right? So the notion that it's inequitable because some people are treated differently, people who started after a new policy was announced are treated differently than people who were hired before that policy was announced. There will be employees who have different compensation arrangements. And I think that's something we're going to have to accept. And I don't accept a priori the notion that there are different regimes for different employees as being per se inequitable. Now, that said, as Carrie points out, we misunderstood the gravity of the consequences of the change when it was adopted, how severe the cost would be. We wanted burden sharing, but we didn't want to break people, right, with the cost of the Sutter plans, the Palo Alto Medical Foundation plan. That's why, again, we moved in the direction of a mitigation, as Trustee Sarver has defined it. When I think about equity, I am increasingly concerned, and the people who are on the screen that I'm looking at right now won't like this because you're all in the management group. The people I am most concerned about are the confidential group, just because of the fact that they're at a lower income level, right? And I am sympathetic to the notion that rather than an across the board formula where 50% of the gap is remunerated, that we should look at doing this according to some kind of income scale. One blunt way to do that is to treat confidentials differently than management group Another way is to try to actually come up with some kind of scale that the percentage of remuneration or mitigation, is sliding based on your income. I do think that the treatment of somebody who makes $70,000 and has to, eat half of the difference between Kaiser and PAMF is inequitable compared to somebody who makes $180,000 and has to eat half of the difference between Kaiser and PAMF. So I am actually increasingly sympathetic to the idea that we need to not go back to rescinding the cap, but that we need to kind of slice it in a more progressive way, the way you might have, progressive tax rate or something like that. So that is my thinking about this. I have been persuaded that we are asking some of our relatively lowest compensated employees, not our most lowly compensated employees, but not our highest compensated employees are dealing with what is a very, very significant cost. So as that benefits committee work continues, number one, I will support the decision tonight to continue, paying the mitigation as proposed by staff. So I'm supportive of that, and I would encourage the staff, or I don't know if our ad hoc committee that Sarver and Thompson were on to look at health benefits, in this narrower way is still meeting, but I would encourage staff, I'm looking at Jackie maybe, to see about some kind of a schedule, which again provides greater mitigation, according to category, in category or income level. And the most important thing is, I am really grateful about what I heard from Ms. Salvatore tonight about a genuine expression of a commitment to work seriously in the benefits committee to look at alternatives that would meet the legitimate needs and interests of employees in the district and the legitimate needs of the district about trying to manage healthcare costs. And I will be honest with you, I don't know in the early days of the work of the benefits committee that there was necessarily any suggestion that that would ever really be a place where really serious talks happened about ways in which we might change our employment and compensation arrangements. It seemed like it was a going through the motion exercise, but at the end of the day, there was no interest in changing the prevailing arrangements. And so it is very important and gratifying to me to hear that very strong and good faith undertaking or reaffirmation on the part of Ms. Salvatore of a willingness to really try to work on a win-win solution, an interest-based solution on that issue. Now, I have roused the wrath of Ms. Salvatore, who has now raised her hand and would like to reply. Edith, the floor is yours.
No wrath, just wanted to clarify that really last year was the first time we met as a benefits committee. So we've had, as under my tenure as president in my 15 years on the bargaining team, this issue has come up repeatedly at the bargaining table, and there has never been there's never been any movement on either side to actually do the work, to do the investigation. It's been, we want a cap. Okay, we'll take less money so that we don't have the cap.
But there's been a committee, no, that's met.
There has not been a benefits committee until it was actually in response, it was generated in response to the shift when we thought that PAMF wasn't going to be accepting the ABC. And we had a lot of member concern about that and started a committee that resolved itself, and we morphed that group into a group that looked at exploring options that would give us more control over that kind of situation. And then in the middle of that, we got an awful lot of admin and unrepresented interest because their benefits were capped at that point in the middle of the process. So I don't want to, I'm not taking away anything from the nice things you said about me, we are still committed to looking through there. We have no interest in the districts wasting money. If they're gonna waste money, like waste it on us, not CalPERS, waste it on students all day long. But I just wanted to clarify that it's not that we were sitting in some committee spinning our wheels pretending to be interested. Since we've been on the committee, we have been interested. It's just we hadn't had a committee yet.
Well, you were sitting in there, Edith, and so my recollection is a little bit different, but I've learned sometimes to take yes for an answer. And so that's what I'm going to do. And rather than focus on whether I remember it differently than you, I want to focus on, again, the affirmation of a genuine and what sounds like to me a very sincere commitment to be willing to work on this to see if there is an interest-based solution going forward. And again, we were talking about cap, no cap, and now we're looking at a different way of trying to achieve an interest-based solution, which is just lower net overall insurance costs with a different provider. And so that, might be the way ahead. Are there further comments or questions on this issue? If not, I would invite a motion for the board to approve the amended management confidential and unrepresented employees health and welfare benefits cost arrangement.
I'll make that motion.
Thompson moves. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Sarver seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, and again, I think there's an implicit codicil along with our vote that the work continues. All right, that finishes our action items for the evening. That brings us to item 11, which is a discussion of future agenda items, and then, and also our reports. So first of all, reports or agenda items. Crystal, do you want to give us with respect to future agenda items, I think we have a heavy docket coming up, right? So I know that am I right that we will be hearing something on equity and diversity? We haven't had our agenda setting meeting, but I think staff plans to bring an item to the board on the October 14th. And I think staff also plans to bring an update on ethnic studies on October 14th. So those are two quite substantive issues. Amika, have I missed you?
Did we do the LCAP and I completely missed the whole thing?
Yeah. Yes.
We did?
Yes and yes, because we'd had the hearing and the presentation last time. So
oh my goodness.
No, we were a little surprised that you'd left the building, that you had developed a newfound confidence in the board. We were happy about that you trusted us so much. But
and
yes,
I had some
it was
really
considered.
tough questions for you.
It was considered and it was approved.
Ready. I have.
It was a 3-2 vote. It was a 3-2 vote in favor, Amika. So it was pretty close.
Oh my God.
It's done.
Thank you.
Trustee Thompson.
I'd like to suggest, as a really following up on the last action items, that I'd like to see the ad hoc committee, which I believe was myself in Georgia, schedule a follow-up conversation with Assistant Sup McAvoy.
So I will let you know that I have met with our consultant, and on the 14th, it's already on the agenda as a potential agenda item to bring the timeline for the benefits committee to you on the 14th. That was already in the planning.
But you still want, you guys should meet, because I think timing of the benefits committee, I think if there is sympathy for the idea of a graduated schedule, that that's not going to be what the benefits committee is going to be engaging on. And so this is a question about whether there'd be a more immediate degree of supplementary relief or mitigation, if you will, for some of our employees. So I hope that Trustee Jack, if she's available, and Trustee Thompson can meet with Jackie to talk about that. Okay, other reports on like what we did this summer, or what we'd like to maybe see agendized? Okay, I'm seeing none. So that, in that case, I will, with some degree of relish, invite a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Before there's a second, are we adjourning back to closed session or?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you for that reminder.
Right. So I'll second it on that.
So yeah, we're going back to closed session, and that means we're going to have to, Laura, if you can get us back into our closed session Zoom, if that's still good.
Yes,
And it's,
absolutely.
and it's the link that's in our calendar, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's your link in your calendar if you accepted the calendar invite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that'll be, yeah, that'll be just the board and the soup. So the rest of you can go home. Except for you, Laura. No, I don't know, Laura. Do we need Laura? Do we have any things to sign, Laura?
No, no.
Okay. Okay. So we are adjourned to closed session. Thank you all. Zoom wave.